and fire alarm. So if you do hear the fire alarm, we will need to evacuate the building. The assembly point is St John's Churchyard, about 100 metres in that direction. Probably it's most likely you'll have to go through the door that you came into to this building to go there, but there will be stewards on hand to direct you if that occurs. Hopefully you found the facilities, but if you haven't, if you need the toilet, if you come out of these doors and there's a corridor going that way, go straight up the corridor and then turn left, and that will take you to both the ladies and the gents. And if you need a drink or food, hopefully you've seen the vending machines in the waiting area inside this room. Finally, can I make sure that everybody has their mobile phones set to silent or turned off completely? And also to let you know that this meeting is live streamed. So if at any point you are addressing the committee, please be aware that anything you say will be part of public record. So please don't disclose any personal information about yourself that you wouldn't want to be in the public domain. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph or tweet about the public proceedings of the meeting. If you do so, I'd ask you to please be considerate towards other people in the room and take care not to disturb the proceedings. Also, if you are taking any photographs or filming, please keep your cameras pointed in the direction of these tables here so you're not taking any photos of other members of the audience. During the meeting, members of the committee won't be able to access the internet except as it relates to the official business of this meeting. Send or receive emails, texts, messages or tweets concerning the business of the committee. That's to ensure that everything that we use to make our decisions is in the public domain. I'd like to remind speakers, first of all, please do use the microphone when speaking. It's only the audio from the microphones that get picked up for the live stream. And secondly, don't put any mobile device near the microphones because that does tend to create some interference and make things a bit uncomfortable to hear. That brings us on to the agenda. First of all, apologies for absence. I've had apologies for Councillor Situ and Councillor Tester. I'm assuming Councillor Soames. We're recording for Councillor Soames as well. So confirmation of voting members. That's all in. And ask everyone to introduce themselves. So first of all, I'm Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm a chair of Old Kent Road Ward and I'm chair of this committee. And I'm going to start with Councillor Harper.
I'm Councillor.
I'm Councillor Kath Whittam. I represent Rotherhithe Ward and I'm Vice Chair.
And I'm John Hartley and I represent Dulwich Hill Ward.
And Councillor Soames has just joined us.
Good evening. Apologies for lateness. Councillor Pierre. Do I need to say?
Thank you. I'm going to ask officers to introduce themselves as well, so that you hear. So I'm going to start on our left.
Greg Weaver, I'm the Constitutional Officer.
Kamil Dolewski, Plan Employer.
Colin Wilson, Assistant Director for Strategic Developments.
Okay. Conor Fitzgerald, Senior Planner on the Old Kent Road team, Southwark Council.
Charlotte Brooks-Laurie, Head of Policy in Southwark.
Patrick Cronin, Team Leader in the Old Kent Road Planning and Growth team.
Thank you. Just before we move to the next item, just to let you know, I'm aware that there's probably more people here for the Crimscott Street item than the Ilderton Road item, so I'm going to reverse those two on the agenda so that we take the Crimscott item first of the development manager and the Ilderton application second. But we do have some items to go through before we get to either of those items, so let's hope that's those people that turned up for Crimscott Street, that means get home hopefully a little bit than is currently scheduled. Notification of any items of business which the chair deems urgent. So we've had quite a large addendum report that's been circulated, although I think just the first 8 pages of those are actual addendums and the rest of it is conditions for one of the applications. And we also had the members pack, which will show the slides that will be presented at this meeting. Disclosure of interest and dispensations. I've had to first of all mention that I am a ward councillor in Old Kent Road ward where one of the applications is taking place, but I haven't taken got a predetermined view on this, and I will keep an open mind when we come to that point. Agenda. Are there any other disclosures? No, thank you. That brings us to item 5, the minutes of the meeting that took place on the 2nd of April. Are people happy to agree those as a correct record of that meeting? Thank you. That brings us to item 6, the adoption of the Affordable Housing Supplementary Planning Document, Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy Supplementary Planning Documents, and the Householder Development Supplementary Planning Document. And I think I'm going to Charlie.
Thank you. So I have a brief presentation which Okay, so you will have in front of you an agenda pack with 3 supplementary plans, and these are the Householder Development SPD, Section 106 and CLSPD, and the Housing SPD. The SPDs have been produced following public consultation, which was held from August to November of 2024. We have considered those responses, and the final SPD versions are due. There will be a Climate and Environment SPD, which will be coming forward for September Cabinet. So the role of an SPD is as supplementary guidance on how to apply the existing and relevant policies relevant to that particular theme, which are currently in the Southwark. They obviously set out how we conform to the relevant legislation as well as national and local policy, which the council must operate within, obviously, when they're making decisions. There are material consideration in the determination of nations. So key dates in the public consultation are set out here. It included an email sent to over 30,000 contacts in the Southwark planning database, and responses were accepted by email and post. There were also a number of events which were held to discuss the content of the SPDs. But all the consultation has been carried out in accordance with the Council's statement of community involvement. The summary of the consultation responses in terms of the numbers received is set out here, and this is also in the agenda papers. So in brief, the Householder Development SPD replaces the Residential Design Standards SPD, which came into being in 2011 and was updated in 2015. It sets out the expected standard of design based on policies in the Southwark Plan. And it's intended to provide guidance on a broad range of works which residents or people renting their home can consider when they're looking to improve or extend. The SPD is relevant to all existing homes, whether a house or a flat, but it does not apply to the creation of new homes. Also includes very relevant guidance on energy conservation, greening, design issues and space standards, and it has also incorporated comments which have come out of the recent biodiversity scrutiny report. The Affordable Housing SPD replaces the existing Affordable Housing SPD, which was put forward and adopted in 2008, as well as the draft Affordable Housing SPD from 2011. It sets out a range of advice on delivering affordable housing in Southwark, and this includes advice on the types of affordable housing products which are accepted by the council. This applies to all housing development, including new build, change of use, conversions and extensions. And it also is very clear on the policy requirements for affordable housing. And finally, the Section 106 in CLSPD replaces the SPD, which was and is now consistently out of date in terms of it's within that SPD. It sets out the Section 106 obligations expected as a consequence of development, and also how SIL is used by the council. It includes a guidance on and off-site contributions. It has been based on viability testing carried out by BNP PRE, which builds on existing policy requirements, which is out in the Southern. Viability testing found that on the whole, on a borough-wide basis, the contributions put forward were unlikely to affect viability in the vast majority of schemes which were viable before contributions were added. Are there any particular questions, members?
Sure, we're going to have a few, but Councillor Whittam.
Yes, looking at the S106 and SPD, and particularly at the mean space open space fee that's been reduced 595,325. Now, ideally, we don't want them to pay anything because we want them to give us the right amount of play space in the mean. But to incentivize them to give us less play space by reducing the fee seems counterintuitive. And the only reason I can see for this is comparison with other London. Well, surely they'll be basing their fees looking at ours as well. So if we're driving down the fee, we're doing our service because we're incentivized less space because it's cheaper.
Thank you. Just to answer that question, the fee put forward is a revised fee. It was reduced from the 595 figure based, as you said, on the research and analysis. The increase to 325 is actually an increase from the existing figure of £205, and that's across open space and play space. It was felt, looking at the figures again and based on recent project advice from the Parks and Natural Environment team, that was, taking an average across schemes which are live or proposed at the moment. That was considered to be a more realistic figure, which indeed we have benchmarked the which actually have quite a range. So it ranges from 115 in Hackney through to £300 in Lewisham. So we felt, based on that research analysis, that 325 represented a reasonable and robust figure, which is more reflective of the cost of delivering those schemes. But in terms of the payment in lieu charge, absolutely, we do encourage, and the policy wording is that we expect provision to be on site. So the PIL charge is where open space or play space cannot be delivered on site. The reasons for that might be because it's a redevelopment of the site that's got a very large built footprint, so actually it's not feasible or possible to accommodate open space or play space within the red line boundaries of that site. So it's only in certain circumstances where we would actually accept that.
Kath, it's worth bearing in mind, as Charlotte pointed out, it is increasing from 200 to 300. So, increase. And one of the things we're trying to balance as well is that, as they are Section 106 asks, there is a requirement for them to be fairly proportionally based to development, and also not to undermine the delivery of the plan. So what we're trying to do is get to a position where if we have offsite payments, they're giving us, a fair amount of money to contribute to open space elsewhere. But at the same time, we're trying to balance that. So when in effect putting off development and nation of development. So it's still a significant increase. But looking at viability at the moment, we felt that the previously proposed increase was probably a bit too high of an increase. And of course, we only get the play space, or indeed the money, if people implement schemes. And some of the boroughs that are charging higher amounts of sale don't actually have much development coming. So they're neither receiving on-site play space or sale or Section 106.
Councillor Whittam.
Can I just ask what the 595 was based on?
It was basically looking at costs of some of our park provision. So it was information coming back from our parks team. But it goes back to the kind of regulations under which Section 106 exists. So Section 106 isn't set up to offset the cost of the council running its parks team. It's meant to be fairly related to the viability of schemes. I think the mistake we made was we put a figure in which is basically trying to cross-subsidise our parks operation, and you can't actually do that under the terms of Section 106 regulations. So what we've done is gone back and we've tested, the figure against viability information. So Charlotte and the team have had the viability information updated from the evidence base from the 2022 plan. Obviously, in that time, conditions viability have got, to say the least, very challenging. But it still is an increase. But we think it's an increase that developers can make, but it incentivises them to try and do the space on site. To your point, which is the important point, that our preference is to have it on site rather than off site.
You may, Councillor Whittam.
I keep banging on about this, but so the 325 covers the cost of the off-site provision. We're not subsidising the developers in any way to provide that.
No, not at all. So, and we have schemes that have come forward, are coming forwards in the Old Kent Road. So Bramcote Park, we are spending £750,000. We're getting that part. That's all been funded by payment. A lot of schemes that you considered. A bit of sale, yeah.
I think just to add to that, there's a very broad range of costs. Said some of the open space and play space schemes in the borough, cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. So that's kind of the end of it. So when we looked at the original kind of figure, that was more towards the top end of the actual costs of delivering some of the Principal Bridge, and equally there's some which cost less if it's a smaller extension. So this was seen as a sensible kind of point within that range that is reflective and fair. Okay,
thank you. I've got 3 questions about the affordable housing SPD. I'm going to go backwards, I think. So 6.4 of the policy is about mortgage in possession clause, where basically, so this is where we've got affordable housing, and the housing association that was due to manage that is in financial difficulty and isn't able to, and is effectively going through a process of liquidating the asset. And we have a policy there where I think there's a 3-month period where either the council or another housing association can step in to take that on. And if that doesn't go ahead, then the housing gets sold on the open market. so my concern there is whether 3 months is enough. And the reason I say that, because I know we have had some challenges where, not quite in this space, but where housing associations have backed out of developments they were involved in, and it's been quite difficult to find alternative providers. And I think, case I've got in mind, we did eventually find one, but I'm sure it took more than 3 months. So it's just really to be sure whether 3 months is long enough to allow that process to happen before that affordable housing gets lost. In I accept is fairly extreme circumstances where housing associations effectively take its assets.
Thank you. We have based the guidance on the standard GLA clause, which suggests that 3-month period. Should the GLA guidance change, we would certainly, be looking to reflect that in our guidance. But we've, chosen to follow GLA guidance on that. The GLA, through the current London Plan review process, is looking at all policies and guidance for FD. So indeed, it may well be something they look at as part of that consultation process. It's something that we can certainly note and monitor.
In terms of a housing association initially agreeing to take on affordable housing, I mean, obviously they then change their minds about that. The MIP clause isn't triggered by that. It's only when the housing association is basically becoming bankrupt. There isn't an instance where that's ever happened in Southwark. At the moment, Southwark is the only borough which still hasn't adopted GLA in London, and the rationale from GLA to enable housing associations to get finance for their schemes more easily, because the feedback from banks had been if laws that GLA recommend was adopted, they would be more to loan money to housing associations to develop.
Okay, that's helpful. So it'd be seen slightly unreasonable if we adopt standards different GLA. So next question I wanted to ask about 6.3 and about tenure blind affordable housing. Make sure that affordable housing is seen to be of a similar standard to market sale homes, and just wondered whether, because we give a bit of a steer there about some of the standards we'd like to see, and cast my mind back to some applications, wondered whether we wanted to do something about order there as well. Now, there might be circumstances where developers think that having separate entrances for housing associations and market housing makes sense in terms of practical reasons, but there have been other occasions where there have been things where we've given a shove back to developers and said, look, you don't really need to have 2 separate doors there. You could have that as a combined entrance and the building would work better. Whether it might be worth including that.
The issue of having separate affordable housing blocks is as we've discussed in this committee quite a few times, usually comes down to one of service charge allocation, particularly with social rent. Generally that would include a separate entrance for people. Certainly, I mean, when the council is doing its own council house building, where there is a mix, including private sale, we have tended to have separate entrances. Certainly what we could do is we could make the point more strongly that even if you were to have a separate entrance, you shouldn't be able to distinguish in terms of the quality of the entrance and the foyer space, because there is sometimes a tendency to push back from housing associations about the size of the entrance and the foyer and all those sorts of things. So we can put something in which obviously cabinet leads would need to agree, but if you were to,
I think for me the big concern was not where you got separate buildings, where you had separate floors in the same building, and there were different entrances to get to the different floors. So I'm assuming it's probably less likely now, given the standards about needing second staircases. I'm probably very uneconomical. do it. But I think in particular we had a development on Ossery Road, where we told the developer to go away and come back with a combined foyer for the floors that were both, yeah, thankfully they did that. But yeah, we ought to be giving
I mean, just
Councillor Harper.
Yeah, kind of a follow on. There's definitely a building in my ward that's a communal foyer, but within that foyer it's broken up into stairwells for different parts of the building, one of which has a lift and then the other doesn't. And the lift one is the non-social housing. It's very obvious as soon as in that foyer, which is.
thank you. I mean, just looking at the section as currently written, we state that there should be no difference between the clearance and quality, the affordable housing and market housing. Affordable housing should share the same access arrangements as far as practical. So we could add in about floor access and foyer arrangements. We've got that as far as practical, so that there may well be circumstances that include site layout, something.
And my third point was just around chapter 4 on viability, is just whether, because viability is one of those interesting words, isn't it? Because what it means to planners is not necessarily what it would mean to a member of the general public, because a building development can be not viable while still actually looking to make a profit, just not large enough to meet the definition of viability. I just wondered whether we needed to be a bit more explicit about what those profit thresholds were in viability, because it does always seem slightly vague and does appear to not always be consistent. So something on that would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, thank you. We can define that. I mean, just for the purposes of clarity, we understand viability as the requirement to meet the policy requirements as set out. As that would be the maximum provision, be that obviously on site or as appeal, plus the other policy, so open space and the other costs as set out.
That's helpful, but I think just if we could have some figures in there, that would be helpful, so that it's transparent to people what that means. Councillor Harper.
So questions about the affordable housing fee. I've got two. One is about the additional guidance around affordable housing definitions and the acceptance of affordable housing products. Is that additional guidance meaning there's going to be more things accepted as affordable housing or less? Is it stricter or is it more broad going forward?
It's essentially expanding on CP1, where we talk about a range of products, but actually we explain why those are accepted or not accepted. In the SPD, we've included a table which really clearly sets out which ones we do accept and the level of discount which those products may provide. So a key issue with some affordable housing products is they're not actually what we call genuinely affordable residents, and that's based on evidence which was put forward in support of the Southern Plan 2022 in our strategic housing market assessment, needs assessment. So at that point, decisions were made as to what the level of discount would need to be in terms of rent to aid renters within the. And also it provides guidance on affordability thresholds.
And can I so just to add to that, no, we're not changing the things which you define as, so they're the same as they are in the 2020 select plan.
I thought that table was actually quite helpful, because I thought, yeah, it's a very straightforward one thing for us to look at when we're trying to, because we always get asked questions about, well, what do you mean by all that listing? Any further questions? Okay. In that case, I've just had a look at the recommendations. I think we probably only need to agree paragraph 1 because the other two paragraphs seem to be explanation. But I'm going to ask that we approve the recommendations set out in the report, but the following supplementary planning documents will go to Cabinet in July 2025 for approval following public consultation earlier this year. So that's the Householder Development SPD, the Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy SPD, and the Affordable Housing SPD. Is that seconded? Councillor Hartley seconded that. And if we just take a call on how people are voting. Councillor Whittam.
Porter,
Councillor Harper. Councillor Hartley.
Porter.
Councillor Soames.
Porter.
And Councillor Livingstone also voting for that. That motion is carried. That brings us on to the development management items on the agenda. So I'm just going to explain briefly how we deal with these items. First of all, so next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications. I'd like to remind everyone on the guidance of how we conduct our business. First of all, officers will present their report, outline their recommendations and answer any questions raised by the committee. Secondly, if present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. First of all, a spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. By now, hopefully, if there are people wishing to object, you'd identify the single spokesperson, or if there's more than one spokesperson, worked out how you'd like to allocate that 3-minute time slot between you. Secondly, the applicant or their agent. Thirdly, a spokesperson representing any supporters of the application who live within 100 metres of the development site. And finally, a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. So that ward councillor and those nominated to speak on behalf of objectors, supporters and applicants should, if you can, sit as far forward in this meeting as possible. That's particularly important for the applicants because there may be questions which come up later in proceedings where we need to have further discussions. That eases our conversation a little bit if you're sat in as far forward as possible. However, it's not an opportunity for members of the audience to take part in the debate of the committee. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating information which is already in the report. The meeting is not a hearing where all the participants present evidence which is then cross-examined by other participants. At the end of each representation, the committee may ask questions of the presenter. Speakers should lead the committee to subjects in which they welcome further questioning. That's particularly useful if you think 3 minutes isn't going to be quite enough time to get all your points across. It's sometimes useful to highlight issues which you think are of concern, so we perhaps come back to you and ask some further questions on those. After we received all the submissions, the committee will debate the application and consider the recommendation. This is a council committee meeting, but which is open to the public, but there shouldn't be any interruptions from the audience. And finally, I'd like to remind everyone present that although this is a planning committee which comprises members of different political parties, they're not politically whipped. All our decisions are made in accordance with the council's planning policy and based on information contained within the relevant reports, together with the consultation responses and any submissions here today. How we approach these applications is set out in the Development Management Report at item 7. If members are happy to note the report, we'll move on to considering the planning application. Are members happy for us to proceed? Thank you. That brings us to, as I said earlier, we're going to reverse the order of the two development items. So that will take us to item 7.2 on the agenda, which is set out in the supplementary agenda, which is for application 20 AP 2993, the Rich Industrial Estate at the corner of Crimscott Street and Willow Walk. That's set out in pages 1 to 239 of the agenda pack. And I'm going to turn to Connor to present this item.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so current proposal is for all demolition of existing development on site, provide a mixed-use development featuring a maximum of 14 stories, comprising 183 residential units and space at ground and first floor level. This application relates to phase 3 of the wider rich industrial estate redevelopment, which was granted planning permission in 2016 for a 3-phase development. Phases 1 and 2 have now been implemented, and as shown on screen, surrounding the application site, which is the area in the bottom left corner of the wider site. Phase 3 site is marked out in red here, and yeah, as I mentioned, there's one existing building within the application site for phase 3. It's access self-storage, which occupies the almost full extent of the phase 3 site, and has an area on the very southwest corner of the site used for parking servicing. The site is allocated within the Old Kent Road Area Action Plan under NSP 56. This extract from the Area Action Plan shows part of the wider master plan relevant to this site. Areas marked out in dark blue are where development allocated in the Area Action Plan has been implemented, and the areas in light blue are where there is planning permission which has been constructed. This portion marked out in light blue is the current application site for phase 3. And photos of the existing site, this access self-storage, the photo on the bottom left does a good job of showing the existing site within the context of the first 2 phases that have been implemented, and the photo in the bottom right shows Pickle Factory within the context of access self-store. And this more photos, I think, showing access into the central areas within the first 2 phases of the rich industrial estate, which is more relevant to later slides, but we'll come back. So this is a summary of the proposal. The extant permission, phase 3, current proposal seeks to enhance the height from the extant permission for phase 3. I think the heights of the extant permission for this phase specifically were 6 stories for the block on the bottom of the images, which is building A under both proposals. That's 6 stories. Under the extant permission is increased to 9 stories. Building B is the blocks on the left of both images, fronting Crimscott Street, and has remained at 8 stories. And then building C at the rear of these images has increased from 9 to 14 stories. But generally the layout of the site, the arrangement of the site has sort of remained the same with the horseshoe arrangement, though footprints have changed slightly with development being slightly set back from the boundary of the phase 3 site on each of the sites. So the site is not within a tier 1, 2 or 3 tall building location under the Old Kent Road Area Action Plan. And yeah, the current proposal is for a building featuring a maximum height of 14 stories, which is a tier 3 building. However, officers consider the proposal acceptable for a tall building in this location, given the exemplary design of the scheme, which we consider to be a significant enhancement on the previous proposal, owing to overall sort of townscape impact in terms of both close to the site, where development has been set back from the boundaries of the wider site, and yeah, and in terms of the townscape impact from further away, where although the proposal is more visible to the this is the site here. Townscape impact to be acceptable, given that the increased visibility of the scheme isn't proportionate to the increase in the number of stories, and this is shown in the townscape visual impact assessment undertaken by the applicant, extracts of which feature later on in the presentation. Additionally, we consider there to be no significant increase in terms of the impact on nearby heritage assets surrounding the site, and given that the amended proposal doesn't significantly increase the impact on neighbouring amenity of existing occupiers within the rich estate or within the neighbouring properties close to the rich estate, there is a increase in terms of impact on daylight sunlight from the extant permission to the current permission, although the impact is considered to be minor by officers. Again, details of which are contained later in the presentation, but overall, I think this enabled us to form the view that proposal in this location at 14 stories is appropriate. The wider extant permission for the site comprised 406 residential units, close to 20,000 square meters of commercial space, and features a maximum of 9 stories. And this plan shows the arrangement of the plots under the extant permission. Plots 1, 2, 5 and 6 have all been implemented under the first 2 phases, and plots 3 and 4 collectively form phase 3 of the which is the subject of the current application. To date, 276 homes have been delivered on the site, 88 of which are affordable, and this is 88 out of a total of 135 affordable homes granted permission under the extant permission, and this is the other factor to consider in terms of the appropriateness of the height of the proposal, which is enabling the amended height has enabled the proposal to increase housing delivery overall on site, but specifically provide an uplift in the affordable provision on site, which is considered the most significant benefit of the amended proposal. Heritage assets surrounding the site shown on the screen to the north on Grange Road. There's numbers 44 and 45, both of which are grade 2 listed. These properties and terrace, the terrace to the east forms the southern boundary of the Bermondsey Street Conservation Area, and not shown on this screen, but by my cursor now, there are several locally listed buildings along Willow Walk, Pages Walk, sorry. And yeah, the rest of the site planning designations shown on screen. I think the most important of which are the allocations under both the Southwark local plan and the draft Old Kent Road area action plan, which I previously. Some more details on the amended proposal: 183 dwellings in total, including 60 affordable homes, all of which are social rented. It's 37.3% provision of affordable housing on a habitable room basis. All of the affordable homes would be provided in Building A, which is the block on the southern boundary of the site, fronting Willow Walk. 1,257 square metres of flexible commercial space, generally, entirely sticking to the uses of the commercial space on Crimscott Street in the Cross under use class E. 67% of homes benefiting from dual aspects provision, and close to 2,000 square metres of private amenity space overall. So a comparison here of the scheme. So maximum height increased from 9 to 14 stories. Number of homes on phase 3 increased from 130 to 183. A 0.3% increase on habitable room basis. Removal of intermediate homes from the scheme. In place, in its place, an increase in the social rent units. And a reduction in the provision of commercial space on site. Comparison of the housing mix under the extant and current proposal is shown on screen. Not significantly different, with the exception of a reduction in 1 beds and a increase in 2 beds, and a small increase in the number of 1 4-bed unit being provided on site as well. So although the scheme overall only results in a 0.3% increase in affordable housing on a hub room basis, in terms of numbers of hub rooms, there is the overall increase is more significant, from 159 to 233 under the amended proposal. Shown on screen now are ground floor layouts, ground and first floor layouts, sorry. So with commercial space fronting Crimscott Street, and commercial space also at the ground floor of Building C to the rear. Only residential dwellings at ground floor level would be on Willow Walk, and a central courtyard space which would be used as a communal amenity space for occupiers of all 3 buildings. Another enhancement of the scheme is removal of the podium from the extant permission in favour of the courtyard space under the current proposal. So shown on the photo earlier was the existing access into the rich industrial estate from Crimscott Street, which is just to the north of this plan. So under ground floor, a basement would be provided, which would be accessed via that route, and would provide blue badge parking spaces and resident cycle parking and bin stores for all 3 blocks, in addition to plant associated with their residential and commercial uses. Typical residential layout of the upper floors is shown on screen. And roof layout now shown on screen, showing communal amenity spaces on each of the 3 rooftops. A focus of the design has been on providing these communal amenity spaces as growing gardens for future residents. Each residents of each block would have access to the growing garden on their own block only. And the surrounding areas on each of the 3 roofs features maximised provision of greenery and PV panels to enhance the energy and sustainability credentials associated with the scheme. And again, site access shown into the existing industrial estate shown in the top left, and in the bottom left is the access from Willow Walk into Building A, and in the bottom right is the access into Buildings B and C from the route shown in the top left. I should also mention here, so residents would be able to access the site from this point, as it's disappeared. From this point, and then come through this area where residential entrances into buildings B and C are provided. There's an additional entrance into Building A in the southwest corner of the central courtyard space. And so these are extracts from the townscape and visual impact assessment undertaken by the applicant, which I referenced earlier, showing the difference in visual impacts between the extant proposal and the current proposal from Curtis Street, which is to the west of the site. The only element that is visible under the current proposal that wasn't under the extant permission is the top story of the 14-story element, Building C. This view is taken from the junction between Willow Walk and Pages Walk. Increase in massing overall here is more visible, but isn't considered as significant as the increase in 5 stories would suggest, partially owing to the setback of the 14-story element within the centre of the rich industrial estate. View from Pages Walk is shown here. The top 3 stories are visible above the terrace of houses, which form some of the locally listed buildings I mentioned earlier. And another view from the northern end of Pages Walk, where the proposal is slightly more visible than from the south of Pages Walk. It's noted there is other permissions within the area that could obscure views that have been undertaken. Most notable is the one at 24 Crimscott Street, granted planning permission in December 23 for an 8-storey building, which would obscure views of the taller element scheme in both of these views. But at this time, this permission has not been implemented. But the site does still benefit from planning permission, so couldn't confirm at this time one way or the other if this would be implemented. So I think overall, in terms of the impact on neighbouring amenity, as I mentioned earlier, the only point where any sort of subsection within this assessment where a adverse impact has been identified is in terms of daylight sunlight impact. The slide on the screen shows the windows where within the rich industrial estate which achieve compliance under BRE guidance under the extant permission, but now fall short of guidance levels. So there's a total of 3 on the south elevation in plot 1, 2. So the areas in blue are the areas where these shortfalls have been identified. In plot 2, there is 2 and 3 within plot 5. So although there is an adverse impact, it is minor in scale, especially given the urban environment surrounding the site, where there is development ongoing, given the sites in the designated, sites allocated within the Southwark Plan and Old Kent Road Area Action Plan. Under the extant permission, plot 1 achieved a level of 83% compliance, which is reduced to 81.4. Under plot 2, compliance has decreased from 87.2 to 83.1, and under plot 5, compliance has decreased from 85.5 to 84.1. And on plot 6, there's been no change in compliance. The assessment also considered impact on other neighbouring properties outside of the rich industrial estate. At the Alaska buildings, under the consented scheme, 2 rooms fell short of internal daylight levels. The current proposal would limit this impact to just 1 of these rooms, and in this respect represents an improvement in the proposal. At 20 Crimscott Street, all rooms under the extant permission would have met guidance levels. Under the current proposal, 5 rooms now fall short of guidance levels, all of which are bedrooms, which are considered less sensitive in terms of daylight sunlight impacts, but overall this is considered to be an adverse impact, but minor in nature. All proposed dwellings feature private balconies. 56% of the units feature private amenity space exceeding 10 square meters. 38.3% have private amenity space in excess of 10 square meters. This figure rises to 50% in respect of the social rented homes. In addition to private amenity space, there's the 415 square meters of rooftop communal amenity space provided through the 3 buildings, and 753 square meters within the central courtyard. These images provide a better sense of the 2 communal amenity spaces I've mentioned already. The central courtyard has is where the entire provision of play space would be provided, and also features a large portion of the soft landscaping features provided in the scheme. More details of the rest of the trees provided on site, shown on the image on the right. In total, the scheme will deliver 30 additional trees provided along the boundaries of the site, in addition into the central courtyard. As I mentioned a minute ago, all play space would be provided within the central courtyard space. Only shortfall out of the 3 age categories for play space relates to the 12 and over age range, where there is a shortfall, but the payment in lieu of the shortfall has been agreed for just over £13,000. And more images of the scheme shown from Willow Walk and Crimscott Street shown here. And I guess to conclude, overall, officer's recommendation to grant planning permission based on the factors set out within the committee report and summarised in the presentation I've just given, with significant weight given to the benefits listed on screen, namely the 60 affordable homes, all of which will be socially rented. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Connor. Questions from members of the committee? That hand, Councillor Harper. Councillor Harper, I'm going to start with you.
Two quite small questions. Firstly, does this Old Kent Road Area Action Plan, does the Old Kent Road Community Review Panel, were they consulted because I can't find their...
Yes, they go to Community Review Panel, I believe it was May 2024. Summary, which is copy and paste of the report provided by Frame Projects, who conducted the Community Review Panel, is in, I think it's Appendix 6.
I'll have a look.
Yeah, so overall, panel was supportive of the proposal in general, especially with regards to design.
So it's page 228 supplement.
Thank you, found it. I'll
Yes.
have a look. And then the second question, I'll come back to that if there is anything. It says one of the key benefits is exemplary quality design. I'm not an architect. Can you explain to me what is exemplary about this?
Yeah, I think a large focus here is the comparison from the extant permission to the current proposal. Overall, setbacks of the footprint of the building from the extant permission overall footprint has reduced to occupy less of the space, which was considered, I guess, one of the more marginally acceptable elements of the previous design. The articulation detailing at upper levels is considered to be an enhancement over previous over the extant permission, and was supported by design officers. Sorry, yeah.
So it's the same architects for this scheme, HMM, who I think won a housing design award for phase 1 and 2. Phase 1 and 2, if you can go and have a look, I mean, they're really well designed homes, both internally and externally, as well as the kind of high quality detailing and the architectural consideration given to the elevations facing each of the street frontages. The landscaping that Connor shows has also been carried out to really high quality. And the other thing that is really good quality about the scheme is the quality of the housing itself. So the social rented housing is on the south side of the C shape, if you like, of the plan, and that is all dual aspect, and includes I think some maisonette dwellings. They are deck accessed, so that bit is 100% dual aspect. And as Connor said, a lot of the balconies are at over 10 square meters, so they're very generous outdoor spaces as well. So we think that quality is both in the plan, in the exterior of the building, and its design and its consideration, its sitting townscape, but also on the interior layout, which has been really, really well considered.
Councillor Whittam.
Yeah, given that it's an industrial estate, to only get an urban greening factor score of 0.35 seems low. Surely we should be aiming for 4 points.
That is correct in terms of 0.4 is a recommended level under guidance. It's hard to compare the current proposal to the extant permission. I think given the previous proposal predated the adoption of the 0.4 guidance level. The proposal does offer an increase overall in the provision of landscaping features, which has been enabled through, again, the footprint of the building to provide more space on site, to provide spaces of grass along the boundary of the site, and to provide the trees I mentioned. Additionally, the central courtyard space does include significantly more soft landscaping features than the podium courtyard space under the extant permission. And beyond this, we have mentioned this to the applicant during the application process, as part of the pre-application process, and was the rationale for the full extent of the rooftop areas surrounding the communal amenity space to be greenery, which also makes a significant contribution to the overall UGF score. And I think overall we consider the applicant has maximised provision of landscaping features on this site.
So just to summarise, you're saying that this is an improvement of the extant scheme that's got permission. Although I'm not quite sure what the figure would have been on the.
Correct. Yeah, in terms of number of trees, and there was obviously the introduction of greenery to the scheme also makes a significant enhancement to the overall UGF score.
Do we have any idea what that score would have been? The previous scheme?
It's something perhaps the applicant might be able to answer, but in terms of improvements to the scheme, the central courtyard space originally in the approved scheme was on a podium, which meant you can quite get the same depth of soil, which gives you a higher UGF score and a bit more flexibility in planting. So I think that's certainly a benefit. And on the roof, you're trying to balance the CO2 savings from having PVs with the UGF. So you could get rid of the PVs and get a high UGF. But what we've done is kind of try to get a reasonable balance between the two things. But as Connor said, the original scheme did predate the adoption of UGF in the which then we referenced. But we have asked the applicant to try and maximise where they can. And you're right, Kath. Previously, as the Branston Pickle Factory, it probably wasn't a haven of wildlife. And certainly, I went on the site in phase one with my own side boots on, studying something while I was there, which then melted my boots subsequently. So probably pickle was obviously quite pungent when they were making it. But the landscaping which is there is been done really well, and we have really pushed the applicant to get those to get that number up. But there's always that kind of balance with what you can put on the roof and trying to get the climate change agenda addressed as well.
Yeah, Councillor Whitton.
Given that the horseshoe shape is east facing, the actual amount of sunlight that reaches ground there is not going to be hugely efficient at letting things grow, and it probably makes things very squelchy underfoot. So things like bark chippings going down and make an awful lot of mess in the foliage.
The landscaping strategy submitted by the applicant has focus on species of soft planting features that would be more tolerant of the conditions here. This final details of the landscaping strategy would be subject to approval by officers, including with input from the urban foresters within the council, to ensure the longevity of all the soft landscaping features within the site. But yeah, that is a sort of major consideration within the applicant's strategy.
Yes, sure.
And just to add, Kath, in the original 2020 version, it was more of a kind of G shape than a C shape. So we had a very long conversation with the applicants about removing what was a nib on that courtyard to address your point, to get more sun in. And I think in the report it points out that the sunlight distribution in this scheme is more evenly distributed because of the way the plan has changed slightly since the approved scheme in 2020.
But the height is going to make it harder for the sun to reach the bottom of the building where the grass is.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there is some degree of compromise on that, but as Connor said, the planting, which is reserved by condition, has been consciously designed by a landscape architect who might be able to, or the architect might be able to say more about that, to get the planting to match where that sun is, and the changes in the detail of the design from the 2015 approved 2016 approved scheme does get you a more even distribution in that space. The previous scheme did have kind of more sunlight to the north corner of it, but the kind of the cutting back by the architect, we think, has got the whole thing in a better place. And obviously, previously it was on a podium, that's the ground floor, which does mean it's lower than buildings around it, but then you get the benefit of more walls, plant things in, and a bit more flexibility on the plan. So it's those trade-offs, but as I say, I mean the architects are very, very good, and the scheme they've built so far it's been really good quality, including affordable housing, which is on Willow Walk. So if you know Willow Walk, well-designed affordable housing block, social rental block on the corner.
Okay. Councillor Whitton did take my question. I was going to ask about the urban greening sector, but no, very good. But Colin, your answer when you were talking about your boots did remind me that there was an issue raised by one of the objectors about on-site contamination, and I'm not sure that's picked up. We obviously have had that in other sites. We've discussed this committee late, so just to understand how the on-site contamination is dealt with as part of this.
Yes, I think the principle of residential development on site of this level of with potential for contamination on this site has been established by the extent permission. Beyond establishing the principle, there would be, I think, included within the decision notice is a condition requiring approval of a remediation strategy in the event that the quality of the ground pose any hazard for either of the proposed uses.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hartley.
Hopefully a quick one, Chair. In the key benefits, the final one is 36% savings and 36% against what? Is it the extent permission or?
Use microphone.
Yeah, so it's a 36% saving against a kind of notional housing scheme. So the way the building regs work is that you have a sort of model, if you like, about how a housing mixed scheme will work, and then you're benchmarking yourself against. So because it's a new building, you're not measuring is it 36% more efficient than the old factory. The building regs are set out to say, well, here's what we think the target is we're going for, and you're measuring yourself against that, and whether you are saving beyond that, which is generally the target, whether you're meeting that regulation.
So when we're looking at savings here, saving against that,
yeah,
things like do we have any comparison to how the extempore would back up?
There isn't. I haven't provided a comparison in either the presentation or the committee report, but the energy and sustainability strategy is the only factor really that the applicant team has engaged with the Greater London Authority on throughout the application process, to essentially maximise the reduction, which I think the GLA are now satisfied has been maximised on site, and they've agreed that 36% is, as I said, maximised, and the contribution listed under key benefits has also been agreed.
Yes, so since the 2016 Planning Commission, the building regs have all been updated, and the requirements for that benchmark has been moved up. So the previous scheme would have been considered, I think, under the 2013 building regulations. The new one under the recent, I think it's 2021 regulation, or the applicant can confirm. So what you have is a scheme which is having to outperform its predecessor because of that shift in the benchmark requirements within the building regulations. But the applicant will say a bit more about the account.
I think, yeah. So that and the urban greening factor feel like two questions we can ask on. Councillor Harper.
Thank you. And you reminded me about the objections. There was one, so there's 144 objections and no support of this in the public consultation. There's one about service charge on the existing shared ownership units on the previous phase. I don't know if you've got a breakdown of how many objections refer to that, because obviously that's a significant number. That's kind of a concern.
Yes. I think firstly I'd point out clarity has been provided in the addendum to the committee report to account for the to clearly set out how many of the public responses respond to this proposal specifically. So the figures in the committee report, which at the time of drafting the committee report was 144, also included responses for, as I said, the previous proposal, which was submitted in 2020. That application was never determined, and the figures in respect of this proposal are set out in the addendum report. I think it's approximately half of the number of responses, but no responses.
So I think this is paragraph 29 of the addendum, which says there were 71 respondents, which 70 were in objection and 1.
Yeah, and then I think in terms of the service charge issue, while we've noted that has been a recurring point in a large number of the responses to date, so far we have engaged with the developer to encourage talks, especially between Peabody and existing shared ownership occupiers in phases 1 and 2. But for the purposes of determination of the current planning application, we haven't considered the issues over shared ownership service charges to be material planning consideration for the phase 3 planning proposal, given that there's no shared ownership or intermediate units proposed under the current proposal. But as I mentioned, we have actively been partaking in discussions with London Square and Peabody, who have been liaising with residents, and I believe significant progress has been made on that matter in the last 2 months, but that might be more of a point for the developer to answer further questions on.
Thank you. I just did kind of say that a significant action reference service charge.
Yes,
Okay.
they do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Helpful, thank you. Councillor Whittam.
I was just going to ask if that benchmark was part L. So that's the one. You used to chop that out 30% above part.
Okay, everybody. I think that looks if it's all the questions from committee members. So we're going to move on to the representations section. As I said earlier, what we will do is we will first of all ask if there's an objector, then the applicant, then any supporters, and then any councillors. I don't see a ward councillor present. And each person will have 3 minutes to speak, and then after each we will have questions from committee members. So first of all, do we have any objectors that wish to speak on this item? Do you want to come forward, sir? If you come to that chair. So what I'm going to do is ask you to introduce yourself and say just very roughly where you live. Don't give your full address, because as I said, we don't necessarily full personal details disclosed to the general public. And then once you've introduced yourself, I'll give you 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you. I'm Brett Sanderson, and I'm speaking both as a resident owner and on behalf of the other owners and occupiers of the 276 homes already on the London Square estate, where I serve on the estate's steering committee.
Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. We strongly object to the revised proposal, mainly because of the 14-storey tower, and urge you to reject this application. First, the proposed height is completely out of keeping with the established character of Bermondsey. The original plan was in keeping with and topped out at 9 stories, stepping down to 6. 14-storey high-rise tower would dominate the skyline, disrupt the area's carefully considered scale, and sets a dangerous precedent for future overdevelopment. The height conflicts with the area plans for Crimscott Street and Willow Walk, which talk to 4, 6 and 8-storey maxima for these streets. This was some feedback to an earlier revision. The developer added units around the periphery and dumped them in the form of a central high-rise, teasing a handful to the detriment of many hundreds. Shoving a 14-storey block literally spitting distance from protected streetscapes makes a mockery of the area plans and undermines integrity. Second, the scale and proximity of the high-rise will cause serious overlooking and loss of privacy for many residents, most of whom bought their homes on clear expectations about height and spacing. These are not just grievances, they are serious breaches of trust. Third, the loss of sunlight is a real concern. A tower of this height will cast significant shadow over existing homes, reducing natural light and impacting our quality of life. Last, we question the focus on commercial floor space. The adjacent pickle factory has 70,000 square feet of office space still sitting empty after more than 2 years. Adding substantially more without a plan for occupancy is irresponsible. This community needs homes, amenities and retail spaces to support them, not more empty offices. We're not anti-development NIMBYs and support the existing development permission. However, this revised proposal moves away from the original well-balanced vision all residents were sold. Perhaps worse is that our concerns have been completely sidelined. 153 public objections have been condensed into less than 1 page of summary in this meeting's papers with no officer response, while other consultees have received pages of consideration. If this tower had been part of the original plan, people could have made informed decisions on buying. Changing the scale halfway through the development, rug pulling people who have already invested with this developer is just unfair. We ask you to reject this proposal and call for a revised plan that respects the local character, protects residents' amenity to light and privacy, and upholds faith in and the integrity of the area plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and within time as well, so thank you very much. Questions for the objector? Councillor Whittam.
Can you tell us what sort of consultation the carried out with the government?
Yeah, so apparently there have been 2, of which I only knew about one of them. That was the most recent one conducted by K&A Consulting or Canda Consulting. It was generally well advertised, I think, but very poorly attended because it was held during working hours on the estate. The boards that were put up displayed some of the renderings that we've seen today, but none of them showed the 14-storey tower. They were all very conveniently clipped off at like 6 or 7 stories. And most of the visuals made available on the public website all don't include that visual of the 14-storey tower. So people were kind of generally blindsided by the presence of this tower when we made it known.
Thank you. Yeah, that's certainly give us some praise later on. Councillor Hartley.
But just very quickly, I think you mentioned that the pickle factory figure of 70,000 square feet, obviously unhelpfully with figures here, but in the coming square meters. My rough calculation, half space still available. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, it does. It's the entire floor plan of like commercial part of the floor plan of the pickle factory. The other commercial spaces elsewhere have been rented.
And you mentioned the impact in terms of sunlight and daylight. We have that slide back.
The visuals of
Yeah,
figures.
what slide was it? Yeah, that showed the windows. Just to understand if so obviously we've been shown this, and that these are the windows which have been affected differently in terms of daylight and sunlight that have changed. Wanted to, obviously, if you could talk about this and what your understanding of what the impact is, talk through that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I live, it's not quite shown, but I live to the right-hand side of the plot 1 there. So I face into that courtyard. And so from my south window, I will have an obstruction of direct view of the sky, and it will cast a shadow over the 2 south-facing windows I have. There's obviously people in surrounding me, immediate neighbours that will be affected. They're shown there, but more pressingly, I think it's the people in the pickle factory that will look out onto this megalith that will have views of the sky obstructed and their direct sunlight obstructed as well.
Okay, thank you. And there was going to be a building there before, but it was going to be out eight stories before, and it's now 14. Is that right?
Exactly. So we're supportive of the former and not the revised.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Any further questions? Councillor Hart.
I realise you didn't bring this up. Actually,
Me personally, no. It's the people in the Peabody who saw, I think there was a billing omission, and they saw their service charges double over Christmas of last year into this year. And they were given 30 days to pay the deficit. And so it actually made the Guardian newspaper, it made a couple of other newspapers. They're also complaining about that they've got a poor door as their entrance, which is common amongst other developments. But yeah, I wasn't aware that they've made progress on it, but there was certainly discussion going on with between Peabody, London Square, and Rendell and Rich managing agent.
Very helpful. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating, so first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to Dr. Sanderson. If you'd like to return to the public seating area, and we will now hear from the applicant. But thank you very much for coming to talk to us. It's always useful to get that feedback from local members of the community to bring some of the objections to light. So thank you for that. Ask the applicant's or the applicant's agent. So again, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, and then I'll give you 3 minutes in which to present to the meeting.
Good evening, members of the Planning Committee. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Riccardo Rossetti, and I'm here on behalf of London Square to talk to you about Phase 3 of the Rich Industrial Estate.
Do you want to introduce your colleagues as well?
Hi there, Catherine Woods from DP9 with the agent.
Marion Clayfield from HMM, the architects for the project.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening about the final phase of the Rich Industrial Estate redevelopment. The final phase will complete the transformation of the former Branston Pickle Factory to a vibrant mixed-use neighbourhood. Our proposals, which have been developed over many years in response to feedback from planning officers and the community, on 3 priorities: delivering affordable homes, enhancing public spaces, and supporting local. Phase 3 will provide 183 new homes, of which 37% will be affordable, all delivered in a social rent tenure. Many of these will be dual aspect, ensuring high quality, well lit living space. We are proud to be building on London Square's strong track record, delivering homes within London, and in particular, the 338 affordable homes for social rent at the Biscuit Factory through our Square Roots brand. The design has been carefully developed to complement the local context. New buildings are arranged in 3 distinct character areas, drawing inspiration from Bermondsey's industrial heritage through varied facade and steps in height. In response to community feedback, we've also reduced massing along Crimscott to better integrate with the neighbouring buildings. Beyond the new homes themselves, Phase 3 will deliver a meaningful improvement. New pedestrian links between Crimscott Street and Willow Walk will be lined with planting, seating and play space, creating an inviting and inclusive environment for residents and the wider community. Rooftop and courtyard spaces will offer further opportunities to gather, play and relax. The scheme will also deliver economic benefits through the provision of a new flexible workspace, healthier neighbourhoods that support long-term well-being for residents. We've worked closely with our neighbours throughout this process. The revised proposals reflect some of the feedback we've received. We've also established a resident steering group for Phase 1 and 2, and residents provide useful. This provides a useful forum for discussing their priorities. We look forward to developing this dialogue as the planning process continues. Finally, Phase 3 will represent the exciting completion of a mixed-use redevelopment, one that responds to local needs and will help this part of Bermondsey. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Committee, do we have questions? I'm going to start, Councillor Whittam.
The objectors say that they'd be happy for the original big stamp permission to be fulfilled. And totally against the new proposal. That's not what you said. You said that residents are in favour.
I think part of my comments were that we've obviously consulted with the local planning authority and residents and taken into consideration some of the points that they raised. Obviously, we haven't been able to deliver on all of those parts that we've picked up, and we hope that the increase in height, particularly on the 14-storey block that seems to be causing the most amount of contention, is taken in sort of a planning balance over the exemplar design that the officers have referred to, and the amendments that we've made to the affordable housing, the increase of affordable housing, and providing all of those units as social rented units.
Councillor Soames.
Can I just pick up on an earlier question my colleague presented to the objector around consultation? And there was an interesting phrase that he uses, that he was hoodwinked. And there was an implication that they didn't think that the consultation process was as robust as it should have been, notwithstanding that the visuals and the boards that were presented to them, I think he said on the second occasion, the second round or the second event, regarding this particular proposal, was basically the tower that is proposed wasn't visible, or there wasn't any real discussion around that. So they are now surprised that they've been presented with a report with a 14-storey tower. Could you just say a little bit more about that? And would he be right in his analysis of his interpretation?
In terms of the visual representations, that were broadly shown at the event in question for the public consultation have been shown this evening as part of the officer's presentation. And that also includes, as part of the officer's presentation, there is a comparison block that actually shows the extant consent and then the proposed scheme that we put forward. That's actually sort of, I think, shaded sort of pink, blue, and yellow, possibly. I don't know the exact colours, and that, I think, has been lifted from the presentation boards that's been taken from the design and access statement that actually shows the heights of the building. Heights were discussed, heights were raised as concerns from residents at the public consultation event for those who attended. So I think that sorry, that's one there. And I don't entirely agree with the comments made.
So just to add, I've got a copy of the consultation boards in front of me, which were submitted as part of the planning application, and they are shown there.
Okay, so that's helpful. So you're saying that diagrams showing that height as shown there were shared as part of that consultation. Thank you. Can I just come back on the consultation point, because one of the things that did concern me a little bit when we heard from the objector was the timings of the consultation meeting. It was clearly, by the very nature of where this is, lots of people are at work, and we heard from the objector that the consultation meetings were happening during the working day, and so people couldn't get to it. So yeah, if you cover that point, it'd be very helpful.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, again, just to direct members to the submitted information in the SCI, there are two public consultations events held. One was held between 5 and 8 p.m. Another was held between 4 p.m. The other point I would like to raise is that there has been a resident steering group established for the existing residents on the Rich estate, and that has also sort of formed the opportunity for existing residents to raise any comments that they may have.
Thank you. Councillor Whittam.
Could you also comment on the amount of commercial space available in?
I don't have the exact number of square feet or square meters that is available, but from the resident who spoke before me, he is correct in saying that the pickle factory at the moment is vacant, which has a consent for office use. Whilst it hasn't been sort of presented as part of this discussion, there is an application which is live with the council for a change of use for that building, as we have we are lining up other operators who would need a more flexible use to occupy that space.
Sorry, I just wanted to come back on the consultation thing. So, thank you very much for pointing out where this was. But I noticed that, so as I understand it, there were two exhibitions, one which took place on the 27th of March 2024 between 5 and 8 p.m. And one which took place on the 28th of March between 1 and 4. So if you were away that week or didn't get to hear about it, given they were on they were on 2 days next to each other, how are you reaching those people that couldn't have made it on either of those 2 days, given that they were, I don't know what day of the week was, but they were consecutive days of the week.
Sorry, Chair, would you mind if our public relations...
Of course, please.
Thanks, Chair. It might be helpful for me to come and clarify that. So I'm Adam McLaren from Candace, we supported London Square with the consultation. So obviously Catherine clarified the dates. We also, in line with Southwark's Development Consultation Charter, publicised that with over 5,000 flyers in the local area. We knocked on over 150 doors in the few days before. We had a website with a survey on that mirrored what was presented at the exhibition. So the exhibitions were 2 points in time for people to come together and provide feedback, but there was a wide window with a range of different options for people to get in touch in the way that works best for them.
Actually, that's helpful. And could I just go back to the point about the tower? Because I mean, obviously, that seems to be, I think, one of the significant development that was in the original proposals, 8 stories, and people who live on this development in the first 2 phases bought their homes or shared ownership in these homes on the basis it was going to be 8 stories, and that was their understanding. And obviously, got quite a significant change in 14. Just talk us through the reasons for that, and how, given that I obviously don't have everybody from the development here in front of us, but it certainly sounded from what Dr. Sanderson was telling us seemed to be the most significant concern of local residents, and it certainly seems to be the concern of his residents' association about how you considered that feedback from members.
Thank you, Chair. I will just provide a bit of an overview about our understanding about what was sort of presented to residents when those units were sold, and then perhaps we can kind of to the building itself. There is a model of this scheme, and phase 3 has always sort of been left empty. And so, you know, my understanding from the team at London Square who were sort of marketing those apartments is that, you know, there's never been an expectation about what was going to be put on that site. That said, there's in the marketing brochures as well, there has always been a disclaimer around the fact that those were indicative images only, you know, rather than sort of saying this was a scheme that was going to be forward. In terms of the proposal itself, I might hand over to Rick about sort of the background to the scheme coming forward in its current configuration. What I would add is that there is sort of notes within the committee report itself about how some of the feedback has been incorporated and improved upon as part of this application, namely the distances between the buildings. So there's quite a significant increase in the distances between them, you know, in order to sort of reduce down you know, any issues of overlooking as part of the scheme. You would have seen as well from the daylight and sunlight assessment that whilst there is some small changes between the consented and the proposed, there is actually an improvement to the sunlight that's experienced in their communal spaces as well, sort of on a March 21st date. So there are things which form part of, you know, our development that have kind of taken their comments. I'll just hand over to Rick about sort of the background to this phase itself, and perhaps we can take it.
Thank you. So this application has been submitted to the local authority, and officers have seen sort of a number of schemes and revisions, and during the life of this application, there have been some sort of substantial building regulation changes that the committee have already sort of touched upon, but one that is focusing, I think, all developers' minds at the moment is that to do with the building safety regulator and the need to introduce. It started off with a need to introduce sort of a second core within each of these blocks. The original application obviously only had a single core, and so new cores have had to be introduced within the space that we've got, and that's obviously affected unit layouts. That's affected the design, and fundamentally could have affected the amount of affordable housing that the scheme viably would have been able to provide. So, working very closely with officers, the design review panel, and we've been fortunate enough to have HMM as architects to design what we think is an exemplar building, and hopefully will win multiple awards again. There's been a need to deliver more units, and in turn that means building up. So again, through pre-application discussions, we were engaged very closely about where the most appropriate location for height should be in this building, and we believe the most appropriate height, or the most appropriate location for height, is where it is presented to you today.
Thank you. Two other things I wanted to touch on, which came up earlier in the committee, was first of all about the urban greening factor, about if we could understand. I know this might not be easy because obviously it wasn't a requirement with the previous application, but to give us an idea about how that might have improved if you do have the previous application's figure, or what it would have been.
Unfortunately, Chair, we don't have that figure because it predated sort of the requirement for urban greening factor. There was 2 points that I would like to flag. I think as officers have already highlighted, we've sort of maximised the greening that we are able to deliver as part of this scheme, but there will also be a requirement for us to deliver, a minimum of 10% biodiversity net gain. Now, as Councillor Whittam very poignantly set out, this is an existing industrial site, and for a scheme like this, there will be a significant uplift in the biodiversity net gain delivered. I'm afraid I haven't got the figure to hand, but that's something that would be secured by condition.
Thank you. Councillor Hartley.
Really, the same question. You probably heard us discussing CO2 savings earlier. Do you have anything more definitive on that front in terms of comparison between that scheme and what's being proposed today?
Thank you, Councillor Hartley. The 1 point I would flag is that the previous scheme was achieving 36% as a whole against Part L 2013. Those standards have now obviously been updated, and we're now at Part L 2021, so it's much more onerous than where we were 10 years ago. So there has been a significant improvement. I'm sure we would be able to go and provide a comparison against Part L 2013 if we wanted to, but it would be significant compared to that.
Thank you. And I've got one final question from me, which is to touch back on the issue about service charges. Now, I think we've heard from officers that the service charges issue is probably particularly impacting on people in shared ownership properties rather than the social rented homes that we'd be getting here. But I presume there are some service charges for people that be living in the socially rented homes. So just if you could give us any reassurance that whatever has happened with the Peabody homes in terms of the shared ownership wouldn't be, we won't be having those discussions 5 years down the line with the people in the affordable housing that you're building here.
I think we can and will give reassurances over the social rented units that are being proposed on this block. In terms of the service charges and discussions that we've had with residents in the Peabody blocks, we believe that matters are resolved. Fundamentally, there was quite a large increase in service charge that was apportioned to the shared ownership block relating to insurances regarding the building safety regulator. Subsequently, London Square undertook a measured survey of the building. It's London Square's common practice that even if we were slightly under the 18-metre threshold, we would still ask for insurance to be on that building, and therefore that would form part of the service charge. We presented the survey to Peabody. Peabody have taken a view that because it is under that threshold, those costs shouldn't apply, and those costs are being reimbursed back to those shared ownership owners.
Okay, so that's some good news for those people that shared ownership, even if it's not on this presentation itself. Any further questions from members of the committee? Okay, thank you very much for going forward. I'd like to ask you to return to the public seating area. But yeah, as I said earlier, if you can sit relatively close to the front in case there's anything that comes up later, we need to come back to you on. Thank you very much. Do we have any supporters of the application that live within 100 metres of the development site that we should speak to committee? Seeing any hands going up? I'm not seeing any ward councillors for London Bridge and West Bermondsey here either. So that brings us to any further questions for officers from committee members. Any views or observations that anybody would like to make at this stage? I might as well say a few words if nobody else is. I mean, this is an interesting one. I have to say, this is it's interesting to hear. I think particularly from the objector about their concerns about this, and I do think the objector has done I think a good job of indicating the problems there were, particularly with the increase in terms of the height of the tower. Having said that, and I think we need to look at this in the round. I think there are some improvements in this scheme on the extent scheme, which we've heard from the applicant couldn't go forward in any case because of the new requirements in terms of the need for additional cores. And I think there are some improvements in terms of urban greening factor, albeit we're not quite sure what the quantum of that improvement is. And what clearly is an improvement, though, is the amount of social housing that's being provided through this scheme, which I think is good news for people on our housing waiting list. So I do have some concerns, I think, about how perhaps some of the consultation went forward, albeit I do recognise the points that were made about the things that were done online and elsewhere in terms of consultation as well as the exhibitions. But I think on balance, I am minded to approve for the reasons set out presentation on this. See if that's where everybody else is. Anybody that has any concerns? Councillor Hartley.
So a great summary, Chair. I think a lot of us are thinking along those. The only extra factor that I would add in is that it's incredibly pleasing to see a better distribution of larger social housing. The challenge that can be for the families that we've got on our waiting list. And obviously we can't ignore the fact that this is going to deliver overall as well as a better spread of units. I really feel for the residents who are expecting a different scale and feel like they've been shortchanged by the timing and the length of this process. But looking at this application and comparing to what has been the kind of thing, it is reasonable.
Thank you. Given that, I am going to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraph 1 of the report on page 4 of the supplemental agenda pack. First of all, the Planning Commission is granted subject to conditions and completion of the Section 106 agreement. Secondly, that the Director of Planning Growth be authorised under delegated authority to make minor modifications to proposed conditions arising out of detailed negotiations with the applicant, which may necessitate further modification, may include the variation, addition and deletion of the conditions as drafted. And thirdly, the environmental information be taken into account as required by Regulation 26(1) of the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017 as amended, and fourthly, that following the issue of planning permission, the Director of Planning Growth writes to Secretary of State notifying of a decision pursuant to Regulation 31A of the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations, and fifthly, following the issue of planning permission, Director of Planning Growth shall place a statement on the statutory register pursuant to Regulation 28 of the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations, and for the purpose of Regulation 28(1)H, 28(1)H, the main reasons, considerations on which the local planning authority's decision is based will be set out as in this report. And finally, in the event the requirements of paragraph 1 above are not met by the 14th of November 2025, the Director of Planning Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission, if appropriate, for the reasons set out in paragraph 949. Does any member of the committee wish to second this? So Councillor Whittam got there just ahead. Councillor Hartley. Councillor Whittam, how do you wish to vote on this motion?
For.
Councillor Harper.
For.
Councillor Hartley. For. Councillor Soames.
For, Chair.
And Councillor Richard Livingstone voting for that. The motion is carried. The application is granted. I'm going to allow people a 5-minute break, but please be back Back, everybody, and thank you for your patience. You're here for the final item we're going to be taking today, which is for 79 to 161 Ilderson Road. That's set out in pages 184 to 452 of the agenda pack, and also the first 3 pages of the addendum report as well. So I'm going to ask Patrick to present this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Planning application 24/AP/3687 proposes the redevelopment of the land at 79 to 161 Ilderton Road to deliver a housing-led proposal formed of 2 buildings, each comprising 2 blocks, separated by a new pocket park. The buildings would comprise large-scale purpose-built co-living, which I'll refer to hereon as PBCL, conventional residential dwellings, and 3 ground floor units for employment and community purposes. This would all be supported by children's play space, public realm improvements, landscaping, cycle parking, wheelchair car parking, and other associated works. The site is shown here edged in red. As you can see from the photograph, it is of a long rectangular shape. It is bounded to the east by the railway line, beyond which is Millwall Football Stadium, to the south and west by low and medium rise buildings predominantly in residential and industrial use, and to the north by the South Bermondsey Overground Station, and a mix of residential and industrial uses, including the South Bermondsey Travellers site. Further to the south, just out of shot, are a number of under construction and recently completed tall buildings along Ilderton Road as you head towards the Old Kent Road High Street. Here are some details and photographs of the site as existing. It is currently vacant, having been previously used as a yard to park and sell second-hand lorries and vans. The site contains no buildings or structures, and the land is a mix of hard-standing and vegetation. The highway fronting perimeters of the site are secured by palisade fencing. The site is subject to a number of policy designations. The key ones are the Old Kent Road Opportunity Area, the Old Kent Road Area Vision AB13, allocation NSP 70, Hatcham Road, Penarth Street and Ilderton Road of the Southwark Plan 2022, and allocation OKR 16, Hatcham and Ilderton Road of the draft Old Kent Road AAP. Generally speaking, these designations promote the redevelopment of the site for a residential-led scheme that may include employment-generating uses and tall buildings, subject to exemplary quality of design, and the provision of a publicly accessible open space at the centre of the site. In terms of the heritage context, the site is unusual in that there are no conservation areas or listed buildings within a 500-metre radius. There are, however, some buildings nearby that are on the Council's register of locally listed buildings. The closest of these is the Christ Apostolic Church at 163 Ilderton Road, being immediately to the south on the opposite side of John Berylson Way. An image of the church can be seen in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide. Some of the ones a little further away include the terrace of late 19th and early 20th century dwellings at 209 to 225 Ilderton Road, and the former public house in the Bramcott estate. This slide provides some key details about the application. As per the table in the top left-hand corner of the slide, the majority of the nearly 52,000 square metres of floor space proposed would be for residential uses. These are the 865 bed space PBCL premises and the 186 conventional dwellings. With regard to the PBCL, this is a type of managed rented housing endorsed by the Mayor. It is a form of communal living comprising ensuite studios for single-person occupation, alongside shared facilities in which to cook, dine, relax and socialise with the other occupiers. PBCL is generally targeted at people starting out in their career who are not yet in a financial position to buy their own home, but it can also provide a solution for single people in middle age. PBCL is recognised as a form of housing for the purposes of housing targets. The other benefit of this typology of rented accommodation is that it releases existing private rented dwellings that would otherwise be occupied by young professionals as shared housing, potentially alleviating the current pressure in the family housing market. Turning to the conventional housing element of the proposed development, the 186 homes would all be affordable. These would all be social rent. In addition to the residential uses, 3 employment units are proposed. 2 of these would be for purposes such as retail, financial services, or a restaurant cafe, or the other one would be for flexible commercial community use. Towards the bottom of the slide, you can see some key details about the design of the buildings and the public realm within which they would be sited. 2 buildings are proposed, the North and the South building, and each of these would be formed of a 1 or 2 story base from which 2 taller blocks would rise. At the North building, these taller elements are named Block A and Block B. At the South, they're named Block C and Block D. Block A would be 29 stories in height, Block B 23 stories, Block C 16 stories, and Block D, the lowest of the 4, at 10 stories. The scheme would deliver a new pocket park of over 700 square metres located in between the North and the South building. Other areas of soft landscaping and public realm improvements are proposed around the base of the buildings. This slide takes a diagram you saw on the previous slide and summarises how the proposed uses would be split between the North and the South buildings. The North building would contain the PBCL premises as well as one of the employment units. The South building would contain the conventional housing along with a commercial unit and a flexible commercial community space. Before talking in any further detail about the proposal, it is important to note that the site benefits from extant planning permission granted in September last year. The site was subsequently purchased by Tide Construction, who are a developer, contractor, and off-site manufacturer who build all their developments using volumetric construction. Tide have their own accredited system of modular prefabrication called Vision Volumetric. These modules are manufactured and fully fitted out off-site and then craned into the superstructure on-site. Tide are seeking planning permission under 24/AP/3687 for a new proposal that retains many of the principles established in the extant permission. On this slide, you can see a visualization and an elevation of the extant scheme. Like the newly proposed scheme under consideration this evening, the extant planning permission proposed a linear arrangement of 4 buildings decreasing in height from north to south with a centrally located pocket park. Like 24/AP/3687, the extant planning permission comprised PBCL in the North building and conventional housing in the South building. Also like 24/AP/3687, the extant planning permission offered 40% as affordable housing on a habitable room basis. In terms of the differences, the new scheme would deliver 66 more conventional affordable homes than the extant permission and 260 more co-living studios. Other differences between the 2 applications include the range and quantum of non-residential uses on the lower levels of the development, the distribution of the blocks across the site, and the size of the pocket park this creates between blocks B and C, which is larger in the new proposal than in the extant planning permission, the proportions and heights of the 4 blocks, and the architectural approach. As you can see from the slide currently on screen, the heights of 3 of the 4 blocks in the consented scheme are very similar to their counterparts in this new planning application. Block B, hopefully you can see my cursor, is the only one of the 4 that is notably different, being just over 13 metres taller than its counterpart in the extant scheme. So you can see here on screen this red line that denotes the height to which Block B in the consented scheme stood. The building envelopes and general disposition of massing established by the extant planning permission is a material consideration in the determination of this new planning application. Here you can see the layout of the proposed ground floor with the key active uses highlighted in orange, red and blue. As the plan shows, these occupy the majority of the site's principal frontage onto Ilderton Road, with some wrapping around the return elevations providing activity onto the pocket park and a section of John Berylson Way. Wherever possible, the back of house facilities and cycle stalls have either been centralised or located in the rear part of the floor plan to optimise the extent of active frontage. Where there would be some inactive frontage on Ilderton Road, decorative panelling is proposed to mitigate the impact. Although not shown here, beneath each of the buildings, a single-storey basement is also proposed. Each basement would be largely given over to accommodating mechanical and electrical plant, along with cycle storage. This slide summarises the range and locations of the employment units within the proposed development. In total, just under 400 square metres of employment space is proposed. The largest of the three proposed units, which would be just over 250 square metres and located at the junction of Ilderton Road and John Berylson Way, has been sized to appeal to a supermarket operator, this particular type of commercial use being one the local community expressed a preference for during Tide's pre-application engagement. Moving on to the housing element of the proposal, and in particular the purpose-built co-living premises. As summarised on this slide, 865 studios are proposed, of which 10% would be wheelchair units. The non-wheelchair studios would be predominantly either 19 or 19.5 square metres. The wheelchair studios would be between 28.1 and 35.2 square metres. These sizes meet the lower and upper limits prescribed by the Mayor. The image on the top right-hand side of the slide gives you a sense of the spatial arrangement and quality of the fit-out of the studios. Each studio comes with a lounge area, a double bed, a kitchenette, built-in storage and furnishings such as a coffee table and plants. In terms of the communal facilities on offer, the scheme would provide, on average per resident, 3 square metres of internal space and 0.97 square metres of external space. Multiple kitchens and dining rooms, lounge spaces, a gym, co-working areas, a cinema and laundry facilities make up some of the internal facilities on offer. The external communal facilities would take the form of 4 outdoor communal gardens, 2 at podium level and 2 on the rooftops. Having regard to the Mayor's quality of accommodation requirements as set out in the London Plan and the purpose-built shared living LPG, officers consider this PBCL accommodation to be of a very good quality. With regard to the conventional Class C3 element of the proposed residential accommodation, all 186 homes would be social rent. This should be treated as a major benefit of the scheme, there being acute need for social housing in the borough. As mentioned in the introduction to this presentation, at 40% by habitable room, the affordable housing offer exceeds the policy requirements and is eligible for the fast-track viability route. In terms of the quality of accommodation, 186 homes would achieve a high quality of design. Some of the positive attributes of the design of these homes includes predominance of dual aspect, no single aspect north-facing dwellings, 10% of the homes being wheelchair user dwellings, and external imperceptibility of tenure. Looking now at play space for the child residents of the South Building, the applicant has optimised the potential for providing this on the podium and the 2 rooftops. The proposed pocket park would also help to play a part in satisfying some of the play space yield from the 186 homes. With all on-site opportunities having been maximised, the provision for 12 to 17-year-olds and the provision for a very small proportion of the 5 to 11's play space would be delivered in the form of a payment in lieu. Focusing in on the qualitative aspects of the proposed play space, here is the proposed podium layout. Focused on the 5 to 11's age range, there would be sand play, a raised play platform, and a playhouse set amongst soft landscaping and seating. The key components of the proposed public realm is the pocket park, which, as already mentioned, is approximately 25% larger than the pocket park in the extant planning permission. To be open to the general public on a daytime hours basis, it would contain hard and soft landscaping, including numerous trees, along with play facilities and outdoor furniture. The boundary line separating the pocket park from Ilderton Road is proposed to be fenced, with 2 access gates, one at the southern end and one at the northern end. The applicant has proposed that the fence would be of an open weave design, achieving 25% porosity and would stand to a height of 1.8 metres. The image on screen provides an impression of the applicant's design. Officers consider that the fence may appear overly defensive and give the pocket park the appearance of a private garden for the residents of the development, rather than a genuinely publicly accessible space. Accordingly, officers have recommended the imposition of a planning condition, as set out in Appendix 1 to the committee report, requiring the applicant to refine the design so that the fence stands to a lower height of at most 1.6 metres and gives greater visual porosity. With a condition in place to ensure the fence is redesigned, the public realm offer is considered to be of a high quality, and the pocket park should be treated as a major benefit of the development proposals. Turning now to the external appearance of the buildings, these elevations give you a sense of the form, scale, and materiality of the buildings. Officers are of the view that the configuration of the two buildings as paired blocks linked by a setback podium is effective in breaking down the mass and bulk of development, helping it to read as a sequence of tall and more slender elements brought together into two pairs. As the image on the right-hand side of this slide shows, the north building would be of a more controlled rectilinear form, whereas the south building would be more elaborate due to the projecting balconies. It must be acknowledged that all four blocks would be of broader proportions in this planning application than in the extant scheme, and that Block B would be 13 metres taller than its counterparts. To some extent, however, this slightly greater bulk is mitigated by the more equitable distribution of the 4-point blocks across the length of the site. In addition to this, the lower height of the podia, compared with the counterparts in the extant scheme, helps to reduce the blocks' increased breadth, lending them slightly more visual slenderness. In terms of the materiality of the north building, a mix of two tones of red brick and masonry effect aluminium panelling are proposed. In medium and long range views, strong spandrels and parapets would break down the form. In closer views, small exceptions to detailing, such as occasional string courses that continue around the edges of the building, would help break up the otherwise continuous vertical columns of brick. And then looking at the south building, complexity and relief would be provided by projecting balconies on the north and south facades, with a single centralised recessed balcony on the east and west facades, a pronounced masonry lip distinguishing every 2 stories, and a chamfered ground floor corner on the southwest corner of the building, with a circular pillar supporting the floors above. With the crowns of A and B lightly differentiated from the crowns of C and D, together the 4 blocks would make for a composed and refined family of buildings. The scheme has been tested in townscape views, and like the extant planning permission on the site, the envelope of which this scheme is very similar to, officers do not consider there would be any harmful impact. Here is one of those townscape views. This captures the view as existing, and now I'm going to show you the same view with the proposed development added in. You can also see in this view the outline of the consented Surrey Canal Triangle scheme in the neighbouring borough of Lewisham. In this context, the scheme would not appear dominant or incongruous. One member of the public has commented on the application, expressing support for the proposal. The reasons given in support include the positive architecture, townscape and public realm impacts, as well as the economic benefits that would flow from the proposal. And then finally, the key benefits of the scheme are the quantum of affordable housing being delivered on site and its high quality design, the major contribution the conventional housing and PBCL will make towards the borough's housing targets. It's actually 1.6% of the target of just over 40,000 additional units in the planned period to 2036. The free employment generating uses, the generously proportioned new public park, the strong sustainability credentials of the scheme, with the UGF being 0.4 and the carbon savings being 55%, a high quality architectural addition to the townscape, and a series of planning obligations, some of them financial, including investment in highways and footway around the site, cycle hire infrastructure, and the contribution of over £1 million towards bus service enhancements in the Old Kent Road area. Accordingly, officers recommend approval of the application subject to conditions, referral to the Mayor of London, and the completion of a Section 106 agreement, and members appointed to the corrections to the committee report as set out in the addendum circulated earlier today. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions arising from the presentation? Councillor Soames.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Patrick. That was really comprehensive. That said, could you just say a little bit more about the north building, which is the PBSL proposal? So, am I right in thinking that there'll be a brick facade and then you've got these modular studio, sort of almost ready-built spaces that will then be inserted, stored inside? Is that how it's going to work? And that's my first question. If you can just, I'm just trying to sort of visualise that. And then how has there been any discussion on rates and charges, and how will that be established? Based on what sort of data? Yeah, that's been.
On the first question around how exactly TIE's vision volumetric system works, as I understand it, superstructure, so that's built the building frame, essentially the steel frame, obviously is erected on site, but the studios themselves are essentially pods. These are manufactured in a factory elsewhere, so all four elevations, the floor and the ceiling, as I understand, elsewhere, and they're fully fitted out internally, and then they are brought by lorry at a factory, exactly, brought by lorry to the site, and then they're craned into that superstructure on site. So when you talked about the elevation, as I understand it, these are built out with that exterior elevation already applied within the factory. And so when they come to site, they're essentially a complete capsule that is just slotted into the superstructure. The developer, when they come up for their 3 minutes, might be able to elaborate a little bit more on specifics of the prefabrication process, but your understanding is correct that it's a frame on site and everything
going in. Just on that, I mean, again, we might talk further to the applicants about this, but one of the photos you showed or images you showed of other schemes like this looked to me as if it was so that the third of those images is Great Court student development on the corner of Rolls Road and St James's Road, so it's elsewhere in Old Kent Road Ward, about sort of 300 metres from this.
What about charges?
By which you mean how much typically would a person renting a co-living unit pay? So the co-living element is the market sale component of the housing offer. Essentially, it is a market sale product, and it is the vehicle through which the affordable housing is. Generally speaking, with market housing products, there is no ability for the planning system to cap the rates at which those PBCL units are let at. That said, obviously the market dictates, because in the interest of filling this 865 unit premises, obviously the developer or the operator of the PBCL premises will need to market those units at favourable competitive rates. But it would be difficult for me to say here and now precisely what a typical monthly rent might be. What I can say is that all of the facilities that I described in an earlier part of this presentation, all of those would be included within the monthly rate that an occupier pays. So there aren't any hidden charges. There's one small exception for this particular site, which is that the applicant is considering providing a spa as the purpose called co-living premises. But that might incur an additional fee, which is reasonable given the cost. But yes, other than that, it was a kind of one-off monthly fee, and there are no hidden charges. But I can't speak to realistically what these units are out at, I'm afraid.
Is it like similar to a student, accommodation model? Obviously, presumably, well, I can ask the applicant, the same question. Students pay, presumably, because commercial enterprise is going to be more, and how will they, charge that against, other sort of single occupied spaces? This is multiple co-living, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. To be honest, they're going to be benchmarking against other purpose-built co-living schemes across London, of which there are now many. Although I've described it as an emerging typology, there are actually quite a few such developments. And so,
which are not designed for student living.
No, so sorry if it was
for commercial.
Yeah, exactly. So if it was unclear in my presentation, apologies, but this is not student housing. So it's typically offered to graduates, people starting out in their career, like I was saying, maybe some adults in middle age. It's generally people who are in a job. And ultimately, like I say, it's a market sale product. So it's at the choosing of the individual whether or not they decide to take up a tenancy. But obviously, like I say, Tide are here, and they may have a bit more market information about realistically where they're pitching the rates for these units.
Councillor Whittam.
Not living generous or residential.
Technically, they're a sui generis use. Obviously, they're a residential form of accommodation, but under.
And they count towards the housing.
So, it conform to residential.
That's right. Although I think the GLA provided guidance, Patrick.
Yes, there is. The Mayor produces London Plan guidance, and there are various different documents. One of them is related to co-living. It was published about 6 or 9 months ago, and there is an assessment in the report that goes through in detail why the individual studios and a range of communal facilities conform with the standards set out in that LPG. You might remember I was talking about the wheelchair units and the individual units and their sizes. So all of those considerations have been benchmarked against what the LPG advises. So if you're wondering what the document guidance is around spatial standards or design quality, it's that really. The report gives an assessment of the studios and finds them to be a high quality.
Where's the Southwark SPD?
Yes, Kath, I think it's something that we're still kind of moving towards. I'm told. And we will be at obviously I think the GLA one in the interim. And on the construction side, will confirm, but I think Great Court was kind of craned in modules, and then the kind of bricks were laid outside of it. So if you know it, it's a kind of really nicely detailed scheme. And the other advantage is it's quicker to build in terms of delivery, and Tide do have a kind of record of getting consents and then actually building them out. So I mean, sometimes you see stuff here that gets a permission and then necessarily get built, and the previous consents on this scheme are kind of in that category. But Tide are a construction company as well as just the company getting the planning permission.
Councillor.
And just to ask, is the social housing trained in as well, or is that not normally essential?
Yes, the entire scheme is predicated on Tide's vision volumetric system. So the whole of the South Building, those methodology of the North Building, those all fabrications.
Councillor Harper. Sorry, John. I'll come to you in a moment, but Councillor Harper.
Thank you. I guess I've obviously got, not obviously, but I've got concerns. They may not be within planning material, but kind of following on from like Kath's questions about the Mayor's guidance, what the acronym was. According to this report, this scheme is like compliant with that guidance. I've noticed a few things. For example, that there's going to be about 1 cooking station per 15 residents. That's just one example I've pulled out. I don't know if people here have lived in shared housing. I've lived in shared housing where there's 1 cooking space for however many residents, normally about maximum 6, and that is a struggle. And so, I mean, in response to the Old Kent Road Community Review Panel, they've raised quite a few concerns about co-living on this scale, whether it's healthy or sustainable. Officer responses have kind of just indicated that they think it's fine. I guess that's based on the recommendations given by the GLA Mayor's Office. Again, kind of looking at the 3 square meters per person in terms of communal space, that again seems like very small. So I guess I take the point that there is guidance we're referring to, which is public guidance, but from a kind of planning perception, do we really think this is reasonable, and do we want to set precedent for housing we want in our borough?
Thank you, Councillor Harper, for the question. I recall a similar conversation when we presented the scheme last time around purpose-built co-living. Just to be clear, there are individual studios there for sole occupancy, and they range in size from 19 up to square meters. I appreciate that's the wheelchair units are 35.
Units,
and the majority
most of them were a lot smaller.
Yes, and they are equipped with sufficient facilities to enable day-to-day to meet the needs of your typical day-to-day functions: cooking, sleeping, dining, and relaxing. And then the idea is obviously that the communal facilities complement that. And as I say, there is this LPG that sets out standards around internal and external amenity spaces. Admittedly, when it was in draft format, which is what the previous scheme was assessed against, it was actually much more onerous in terms of what was required. So you cited there the 1 cooking station per 15 residents, but actually it was many more cooking stations per resident on average than what's in the new LPG. And that's a kind of consequence of actually the mayor and the board team of the GLA actually having gone out and looked at and taken first-hand research of various different purpose-built co-living premises now they've actually been built out and they're being used. So it's that kind of first-hand evidence. The process was also informed by residents, by developers, and the LPG was formulated in its finalised format on that basis. So while I accept on a kind of personal level, you may have some reservations about the standards that are set out in the Mayor's LPG, which in the absence of a Southwark SPG or an SPD, we have to refer to. I suppose all I can say is that there's probably a difference of opinion here, but you have a range of unit sizes. They're complemented by communal facilities. And as I was saying, ultimately, it is the choosing of an individual whether or not to take up accommodation in a premises like this, or whether indeed to live in a shared house or to take up live elsewhere, perhaps further out. It's ultimately the discretion of the individual, and that's kind of the nature of the private housing market. So we have to do our assessment against the adopted policies and guidance there is, and this is found to be compliant with that, with some very small shortfalls. Balance, we deemed it acceptable. So absolutely take Councillor Wisdom's point that maybe it, pursuing an SPD at a local level that perhaps sets some more onerous standards might be reasonable, but at the current time we have the LPG against which we're benchmarking schemes, and this is on balance it deem it to be compliant with that.
Okay, there might be some space for further discussion with the applicant, I think, on that subject. I think Councillor Hartley. First, my thanks to Patrick, Kath and Kenzie. Between them, I won't have to ask any questions about why we're hearing so much about what the Mayor loved. I'm going to move on to one of the positive benefits of the scheme, as detailed to us, is the pocket park. Very, very welcome. I can see how it'd be well used by residents in this new development, and some of the existing residents on the other side, Ilderton Road, presumably, would also be interested. I mean, my starting point with a public green space is how nice it would be if it were open 24 hours, though I appreciate that there will be management issues, particularly with a design space like that. My question is around the current proposal of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Is that something that we've taken to the developer, that the developer brought to us, or agreement between the two of you? Because at this time of year, it seems a criminal shame that we're missing out on daylight, and middle of the winter, it's going to be equally wasted because we'll be opening up. It'll be being opened up and closed in the dark. And some of the more established parks in Southwark that close tend to follow a dawn to dusk program. Have we pursued that with the applicant?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hartley. It's an interesting point. These are the hours put forward by the applicant, and which we felt were reasonable because there is at the current time a culture of antisocial behaviour in the neighbourhood, and that's being experienced at Bramcote Park, and it at the current time it is having a sort of deleterious effect on the quality of life of residents there, which the applicant is mindful of. And that's why they proposed closing it at 9 p.m. And yes, you're right, there are some management issues around it too. Although it is publicly accessible open space, it is privately managed. So we have to be reasonable about what we're asking of applicants for taking on that responsibility. However, Tide are here this evening, and if you felt strongly that perhaps they might want to push their closing time a little bit later, you could put that to them if they might be amenable to it. But 14 hours a day is reasonable. But I accept you might have a difference.
I saw Councillor Whittam.
Yes, I think the park, who does it belong to? It's counting towards amenity space for the residents in the block, not separate to that.
So the report sets out that when we're looking at common amenity space and play space, technically, when you're looking at the quantity, you have to provide a landscape designation plan. So I think you're probably thinking about the images in the committee report that show how that's distributed with the site. And yes, technically, the applicant can count the pocket park towards their play space provision.
So they should be able to use it.
Sorry, yes, for the residents of the development. And actually, as I understand, the proposed hours of closure of the park would only be in respect of members of the public. So residents of the scheme will be able to access those spaces outside of those hours. It's just that the gates would be closed and members would come in between 7 a.m.
So they have the door into the.
I think the image there is probably quite helpful. So it shows doors, I think, both the north and the south building, doesn't it? And then based on the road. So presumably you can use the doors.
Will be able to get through those doors.
We can ensure in the terms of the Section 106 agreement that 24-hour access is available to all residents of this scheme to the pocket park.
And the gates open.
And certainly in terms of public accessibility, yes, gates would be open. Currently 7 a.m. to 9 p.m, but maybe dawn to dusk.
Well, just to say, I wouldn't want to change those hours because I totally agree with you. There has been a lot of behaviour, but as long as it was available to the residents, also I'd be happy with that. But in terms of full use of access to, I'm happy with that.
Okay, that's a discussion that I feel we may continue later. I wanted to pick up on paragraphs 341 to 350, which is about the daylight and sunlight impact on the Barkbrook Road flats. Because of all the daylight and sunlight impacts, that did seem to be the most significant that was set out in the report. I just want to understand how that differed to the extant commission. And this is actually the third time that we've had this site come forward. The two previous permissions granted about because obviously that's quite a big impact. It's understanding how that differs from what's previously approved.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yes, so 45 to 56 Barkworth Road. I actually have a supplementary slide that might be helpful for members. I wasn't sure if this question would come up, but this is an excerpt from the committee report that shows the layout of, shows the relationship of the neighbouring buildings around the site. And so the Barkworth Road flats are denoted here by the letter B. So it's essentially a cluster of 2 blocks of flats. And the impacts relative to the consented scheme are summarised at page 80. Sorry, you've got a different report at paragraph 334. But in summary, when we're looking at this particular measure of daylight impact, which is VSC, vertical sky component, we categorise it by minor, moderate, and substantial adverse loss. And as you can see from this table, it is true that there would be 29 more windows that are in that substantial adverse loss category, and then there are 24 fewer in the minor and moderate categories. But essentially what's happening in this situation is that there are a series of windows that were substantially impacted to a large extent in the consented scheme, and which, because of the new proposal, are being impacted further. But actually, Barcroft Road is quite an interesting neighbouring development, because almost all of the windows that are impacted to a substantial adverse extent are beneath deeply overhanging eaves. So it's actually the inherent design of the building itself that limits daylight to those windows. They have a suppressed or low level of current VSC. So when you're talking about very small amounts of VSC, any further change produces a significant percentage change, and that is why they categorise as substantial adverse losses. But when we look at the absolute VSC, so that's the amount of actual light, very simply, that's the amount of actual light that remains that those windows can receive, relative to what they would have achieved in the consented scheme, is not actually a marked change. So often when you're looking at daylight and sunlight impacts, you do have to take account of the actual nature of those buildings themselves and whether they are actually limiting their own daylight receipt, which is, interestingly, is the case here. So that is, in summary, what the kind of daylight assessment sets out. And interestingly, Chair, you talked about Barcroft Road, just for kind of completeness. Actually, it's 141 Burnley Road. If you were to compare this scheme against consented, it actually arguably encounters greater impacts. But as the report explains, this is because that property sits hard against the back of Ilderton Road. Generally, in those situations, you expect any development on the site opposite really to only have to create a similar crossroad relationship. This application is quite a bit more considerate. It sets back on the corner and sets back from Berylson Way. So while there are, relative to the consented scheme, some marked changes in losses in daylight, those units themselves are dual aspects, so they actually have other rooms that benefit from daylight in a different direction. So overall, the application, the committee report concludes that while there would be noticeable losses and they have to be taken into consideration in coming to your view this evening, they are not of such magnitude that those spaces become colder or darker, or noticeably colder or darker. And of course, you then need to balance that against all the other various planning benefits of this proposal. So in summary, those are the 2 buildings that are most impacted in terms of daylight, VSC specifically. But as I say, as the report sets out, on balance, we consider them to be.
And the other question I want to ask was slide 25, which shows the juncture of John Berylson, now known, and Ilderton Road. I was slightly concerned about the tree and green space there, given very large volumes of people they are walking around that corner 23 times a year, or plus on other cup games, just to understand how that's been thought about, because that looks quite nice, but it might not look nice very quickly if it's trampled over or things. So just to understand the sort of resilience of that space.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't think I have a ground floor layout or a site plan that shows the landscaping of this particular corner. So all we've got to go on for today is this visualization. But the way this has been configured is that actually that corner at ground level is quite generously chamfered. So you do get quite a large stretch of public realm behind that pillar and before you get those doors to ideally the supermarket. And so actually that provides the principal route for all supporters on a match day. And there is also additional pavement that runs around the edge of at the very kind of hard edge of that corner between Alderton Road and John Berylson Way. So overall, we felt satisfied that there is ample public realm there. And as we've discussed at various points this evening, the evergreening factor targets are challenging to meet. So we do encourage applicants to take every opportunity, obviously balancing it in tension with providing adequate public realm, but we do encourage them to take every opportunity to provide greening. And this was an obvious opportunity. Building line, that southern building line is set back.
Presumably that's something that we looked at as part of the process to approve this, and this would be that matter that obviously we have further discussions later.
Yes, absolutely. So hard and soft landscaping details are normally secured by condition, and we have an urban forester who reviews those proposals and makes sure the landscaping scheme, the planting, etc., are appropriate to the context. So whether they're hard wearing, whether they're kind of appropriately enclosed, etc. So there is a kind of level of scrutiny that comes post that looks at ensuring that the provision of landscaping is suitable.
And just to confirm, in a fairly early pre-application meeting, we did ask the developer to sham for that call for the reason you mentioned, and I think there's an image of paragraph 571 in the main report which shows you that space about 3 metre from the column to the outer wall of the building. So yeah, the applicant got that and changed the scheme accordingly.
Yeah, no, I think it's, and yeah, I can see how whatever supermarket is there is probably quite sustainable, isn't it? I guess given that trade as well, which is probably the community that would be economic. Right. One other question I had, which is about paragraph 578 about cycle storage and about the fact that it says there's a shortage of long-stay cycle.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So yes, the purpose-built co-living premises propose to include cycle storage primarily at basement level with a small area at ground floor level. We do have very ambitious cycle storage expectations in the Southwark plan. The London plan sets its own standards separately. They're a little bit less onerous than ours. And as you can see from the table at page 577, in fact, I do have a supplementary slide just in case it came up, just to show what the level of provision is. So if you look at this table and specifically at the red cells, these are highlighting the purpose-built co-living cycle storage provision. And you see there SP22 and LP21, these are the Southwark Plan 2022 standards and the London Plan 1 standards. And the applicant has provided 460 cycle storage spaces. Obviously, as you can see, those fall short of the Southwark Plan and London Plan standards. And as that kind of call-out box explains, the applicant has offered what's called a cycle share scheme. So it's essentially to supplement the long stay cycle stands that are currently falling short of quality. They're proposing to provide this cycle share scheme, folding cycles in lockers that are bookable by residents free of charge. And there would be 60 in total. I've asked from the committee report that effectively the purpose-built co-living can operate as 2 separate demises, and in Block A to help supplement the shortfall, 45 of these rentable bikes would be available, and then in Block B, 15 would be rentable. And the idea is that this is just helping to supplement the long stay provision. So what it effectively does is bring that provision of 460 up to 520. And 520 as a proportion of the Southwark plan is 60% of the requirement. So it's still a shortfall, but it would be, you have to bear in mind the impact of providing 865 long stay cycle spaces, because it is enormously space consumptive. in a scheme like this, when we're trying to achieve things like active frontages at ground floor level, trying to optimise housing delivery, and we're also trying to reduce the carbon footprint, what we don't want to do really is to start developing out multiple story basements because it's very carbon intensive. This scheme already has a single story basement, which is largely given over to cycle storage. So in our view, taking into account this additional provision of rentable bikes, on balance, and I recognise it as a deficit of the scheme, we consider that overall it is acceptable. There are other things that form part of the basket of planning obligations, such as a travel plan that will monitor this. And if it's found that actually this 460 long stay provision is not serving adequately the residents, there are other mechanisms in place where additional forms of long stay or access to cycle hire or cycle storage could be made available. So essentially, we have a review mechanism of fix. Generally speaking, the experience across most major developments is that actually often the level of cycle storage that is delivered, when it's delivered in line with policy, isn't actually used. So we have to sort of bear that in mind, balance it against factors I was just saying now. So on balance.
Okay. And actually, I did say I was going to ask a final question, but given you're talking about transport, I'll follow up on that a little bit in that the previously agreed scheme, there's a discussion about the Section 106 for transport would normally put to buses. Given that this is next to South Bermondsey Station, just to ensure that there'd be flexibility in that contribution if we thought it was in the future wise to use it for the station instead, that would be something that could be done. Given I often tell people South Bermondsey Station is probably the dottiest station in Southwark at least, quite possibly all of South London, definitely living.
Yeah, the way it's worded in our Section 106 obligations is those kinds of investment in infrastructure locally.
Councillor Soames.
Just very quickly on the previous question and insecurity, I think the whole proposal around it excellent. But the foldable bikes, that's going to, I mean, you know, actually attract social behaviour. The security of that's going to have to make it very serious, because then going forward, you know, potential residents would then, their whole health and safety would be at risk. And I know other parts, certainly sort of within my ward, where there are cycle storages, they've been broken into, and so that's something that needs to be very careful.
And Councillor Whitton.
Yeah, I was just looking at the amenity space shortfall and looking at the balcony. Balconies look very flimsy in slide 20. Almost made out of opening. Are they actually made like that? Second page.
I mean, the applicant can probably confirm, and I mean, certainly it's something that we can cover. It is covered in the condition about the detailing, not only the elevation but a requirement. I think to a full scale mock-up. The applicant can confirm, but I would assume that they would be steel railings, kind of mild steel railings. And that the balconies are a mix of projecting balconies and partly set-in balconies. So we did a conversation with the applicant 19 about not having all the balconies set back into the building. And they basically tried to accommodate that within that modular construction system, which they hadn't done before, but they have looked to accommodate that as the other thing we use details of, as well as how the balconies are drained. So are they positively drained? Drain pipes.
The white bottom That kind of like
Has it got? Is it?
this is like a shower tray.
Yeah. So does it? So positively drained would mean basically a gully then drain into a drain pipe.
You
Not
don't want it to
positively
drain
drained means that it drops onto your neighbour below you. So the applicant can probably confirm, and it's something that we'd be looking at details of. We have talked to the applicant, discussed with applicants how they're going to manage the drainage of their balconies.
There's
Because
also a big shortfall. Based on
Yeah, it is true that some of the balconies are not 10 square meters, and under the residential design standards, we ideally like balconies to be 10 square meters. For 3-bedroom homes, we require them to be 10 square meters, but we do allow for shortfalls for homes that have lower occupancy, 3 bedrooms. So yes, it is true that some of the bed units don't achieve balconies of 10 square meters, and the shortfalls have been commuted. And where possible, on schemes, we hope that that can be provided in common amenity space. However, that hasn't been possible in full here, so we are taking a solution for the shortfall. But you need to balance sometimes other considerations against balcony size, so things like internal sort of daylight sunlight inhibited quite a lot by oversaving balconies. So often there's a bit of a balance struck here. Other things like overheating internally. So there's kind of environmental consideration too sometimes in the size of the balconies. So yes, you're absolutely right. The report does set out there are shortfalls, and the applicant has tried to offset that where possible, but where that's not, we are taking up.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions at this stage. So I'd like to ask, do we have any objectors? To the application? You still need to give the opportunity in case anybody came to the committee to raise their issues. In that case, could the applicants say? Thank you very much, and thank you for waiting until this point in the evening. I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourselves, and I'll give you 3 minutes.
My name is Oliver Shepherd from DP9 Planning Consultants on behalf of Tide.
George Fairley at DP9 Planning Consultants as well.
And hello, Julie Wilmer, TP Bennett Architect.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
As you've heard earlier, Tide is an experienced development and contracting company with an exceptional track record in delivering projects using its accredited off-site manufacturing system, Vision Volumetric. It has successfully delivered a range of schemes across London, including here in Southwark, providing a range of housing typologies, including affordable housing. Tide gains approval and delivers its projects quickly, demonstrating the significant benefits in off-site manufacturing. These include construction timelines up to 50% faster than traditional methods, consistently high quality achieved in a factory-controlled environment, significantly less on-site disruption, such as noise and dust, enhanced sustainability and environmental performance, including up to 45% lower embodied carbon compared to traditional construction. This site benefits from an existing consent that remains implementable until 2027. When the previous application was considered by the former committee in November 23, it was supported unanimously, and we believe this new application delivers even more for the borough. It aligns closely with the previously approved scheme, maintaining established parameters for land use, height and massing. The overall design and building envelope are largely consistent with the extant permission, but this proposal introduces very significant enhancements. There are 865 fully furnished co-living units, an uplift of 260 over the consented scheme. There are 186 affordable homes, 66 more than previously approved. That's an increase of 50%. Significantly, 100% of the affordable housing will be social rent, replacing the intermediate tenure included in the previous scheme. This is a real tangible contribution to meeting local housing needs. Compared to the extant permission, Tide are proposing more affordable, that is more affordable, genuinely affordable housing at a time of acute need. Tide have also enlarged the proposed high quality pocket park at the heart of the site, which will provide a public space for both local and new residents. Development will further contribute to the surrounding area with a range of flexible ground floor spaces that could accommodate retail units, a cafe or community event spaces. These spaces will be complemented by improved greening, landscaping and public realm, creating attractive functional areas where residents can relax, study, work and socialise. This application is an important step towards realising a vision for a mixed, vibrant and diverse neighbourhood on a site in a ward that needs significant revitalisation. It addresses the growing demand for high quality co-living accommodation while providing much needed affordable housing at the most affordable tenure and at a time of greatest need. If approved this evening, Tide will begin the off-site manufacture of this proposal this year and aim to be on site as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the committee, there were a few questions we had from officers. If anybody would up on any of those at this? I'm going to go with Councillor Hart first.
It's actually just a very small question, but based on the discussion about the cycle parking, I wonder whether it's something the applicant would consider, like having a guidance or rule that people were allowed to install wall mounts for bikes in their rooms, given that there may not be enough bike provision for everyone in the cycle storage. You know, like in lots of managed housing, there's like quite stringent rules about what you're allowed to put on your walls, but maybe there'd be an exception for wall mounting bikes.
I think as we, listening to the sort of question and answer session just now, we sought to strike a balance between the provision that we've made in the basement without getting into a bigger construction excavation with further basements, which is what we'd need to do if we were going to construct more cycle parking spaces. And as officers have mentioned, the take up on some of the schemes that have met stringent standards to date has not been full. So I think, and the way that the housing is designed would probably make it quite strange from a space planning perspective for people to bring bikes into the development, into lifts and into individual homes on floors further up the building. So I think that that's probably a bit of a challenge.
Sorry, Councillor Whittam.
Can you confirm that residents will have access to the pocket park for 24 hours?
Correct. All residents of the development will have access to the pocket park for over a 24-hour period.
Councillor Hartley.
If you were paying attention earlier, you probably picked up the committee possibly not in one mind on this. But I'm going to raise the issue again of how clunky 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. throughout a 12-month period is. Are you happy to be more?
Yes. In very simple terms, we're willing to look at a wider, more responsive thing. It may be that it's based upon, I think dawn to dusk was mentioned, so it may be that the seasonal shift makes sense. I think we are acutely aware, I'm particularly familiar with this area. Yes, it does experience antisocial behaviour issues. I don't think any of us are sort of turned away and said, well, that doesn't exist or it won't exist in the future. But yes, we're prepared to something more flexible.
But that was my more difficult question. We had a brief summary from Patrick about it, but can you tell us a little bit more about the volumetric build process?
Absolutely, I'll do this one. So you have a basement, ground, first up to the podium level, which is constructed in a standard concrete frame with brick wrapped around it, as you would have normally. Then at a transfer slab, so you have a very thick concrete slab and a core, standard concrete core with your lifts and your 2 stairs continuing up. And then around that core, the modules get craned in and piled one on top of the other. It's quite an amazing feat. that then finishes and the brick is wrapped around. So the brick facade is continuous and wrapped around. So once the building is complete, there is nothing to indicate that it hasn't been constructed in a traditional manner.
And that to me seems very straightforward. I'm sure these things aren't straightforward. It seems relatively straightforward where you've got the co-living studio apartments, but you've obviously also got 1, 2, and 3 bedroom social housing units as well. So just to understand how that bit works.
So in a very similar way, I completely agree with you that the modular system lends itself very obviously to hotels and PBSA and replication, but it also can be used and has been used successfully on more standard C3 residential. It takes quite a bit of design development to ensure that the layouts of the residential units are compliant with the London plan, with the Southwark plan, and also compliant with the requirements of the modular system. But that has taken the bulk of our redesign ultimately.
It's worth adding that, I mean, I mentioned sort of Tide experience in this sector. Tide have completed more than 30,000 homes building in this way. There are more than 30 buildings. They recently completed a scheme in East Croydon, which I think is called the Enclave, which contains co-living and on-site affordable housing in exactly the way using here.
And just in terms of touching on some of the earlier conversations we had about what's in people's DCBL studios and what the communal facilities are. And we obviously got in the report some of what some of those are. Looking at the report, it all seem to be very much on the communal stuff, all seems to be on one floor. Is that right? Or is it spread through the building?
So the co-living internal amenity we have at ground, we have at first, and then we have at top floor.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. And in terms of the cooking facilities in the units themselves, yeah, because we obviously got something that says kitchenette on the diagram, but just to understand what that means.
So I believe it's a single hob, a small number of base units, and a small amount of worktop.
Sorry, yes, that's a good question. The kitchen sink, I think, was the question.
Oh, kitchen sink, yes, that'd be helpful, wouldn't it? Yes, kitchen sink. And so an under-counter oven and an under.
Okay, so you got an oven as well as a hob. Yeah, probably can't smoke your kippers in there given that space. Councillor Soames.
Can I just ask, how do you envisage sort of securing these foldable bikes, given that there is antisocial behaviour, and that would be an attraction for antisocial behaviour, notwithstanding that we then got the pocket park that which would be open to the public for a period of time, whatever we decide on potentially this evening or agree on this evening, for individuals congregating, because that would be a prime site in which they would be drawn to. So what are your proposals around securing that and safeguarding potential? And then my second question, if I may, Chair, is you heard me asking Patrick earlier around the rates and how going forward you would propose marketing them, and what's your benchmark of proposed future rates? How will you decide how affordable? Thank you.
Okay, just taking the second question first. The affordable housing is at social rent levels, so it's capped, and that would include service charge caps. The co-living units would be essentially benchmarked against rents achievable on similar developments at the time that the scheme is ready to be occupied. So I couldn't give you a estimated sort of asking rent at this point, because essentially we are too far away from the likely point at which the scheme would be completed and therefore marketed. You wouldn't market it at this stage as too.
Can you just give us a rough estimation of what they are currently?
I don't know that, I'm afraid. I can't respond.
Different operators market at different rates. So some operators target very high end, some more mid ground, and that would be very dependent on their own analysis of the area, what would be required.
Just on the security, I think that comes down to two things. One, the natural surveillance, well, the quality of the design and the natural surveillance within the operation of the ground floor and within the open space, the public realm that we're providing. And secondly, obviously, there's active management that will be on site at all times. As a management plan that will set that out. And I guess we will need to respond to the management plan as a living document, in the sense that, you know, we will respond to kind of how those conditions evolve over time. But I think high quality design, management, natural surveillance are probably the three primary ways of responding to that point. The Whittam?
Yeah, just going on, I was just going to ask about the staffing. Got in paragraph 385, 25 full-time equivalent total. Seems that there wouldn't be that many people on site at the same time. Because obviously you've got doesn't seem a lot of people to run building with bedrooms.
I think from experience with other projects of a similar nature, that's the sort of number, the one that you're setting out the bullet points under paragraph 385, what is needed to run something of this nature. I think it's fair to say that many of those people are going to be sort of at the ground and sort of you know, and the amenity spaces, which Julie's referred to at the base and the top of the building.
Sorry. Probably a amendment who's come in. The figure of 25, who knows where it's come from? Sorry, it's an error on my part. It should just say 6. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that. Sorry. 5 full-time equivalents. Right. So essentially, it's just the bullet pointed jobs are the roles within the PBCL. So it's 5. It's not 25. It must have a typo or an error, but essentially what it's saying is there'll be a general manager, a resident manager, resident advisors, at least 1, an engagement assistant, 1, a maintenance operative, 1. Comes to 5. Must have actually accidentally typed 2 and then 5 rather than just 5. Hence you got 25, not 5. Sorry.
So how many cleaners? That's just the one maintenance.
That might be something that Tide can answer.
Awesome, is that here? Yeah, just to understand how you're doing some of that your communal areas cleaning, all those sorts.
I think the phrase full-time equivalent probably deals with this in the sense that obviously there's certain people that come in for shifts. So it's 5 equivalent of full-time people, but cleaners would be part of that setup and would be there for the periods of time that they're needed to keep the common paths clean. And if the residents in individual homes want something, then I think that's part of the same service charge, and therefore it's part of the same offer. So I think it's equivalent. There's likely to, I suspect, some people in there less, some people in there more. But it's a full-time equivalence means some people are going to be in a shift basis.
And we think that might be where the 25 has come from, with 5 full-time, and then the 20 with the shift workers, cleaners, etc.
Right, okay. Yeah, security seems to be a thing that's slightly missing from that. What are the security arrangements?
But I think I'm probably repeating what I said earlier on in the sense that that there's obviously natural surveillance, there's the quality of the space, there's the activation of the space, and then some of the managers and some of the people that are referred to in here would perform some sort of security role. I think I'm right in saying that out of normal hours, then there would be sort of security provision on site round the clock, so when it's quieter periods at night.
Okay. Were you able to pick this up and condition? I think the sort of management.
The co-living will be 24-hour managed.
I was going to say there is a management plan, so we can put that in.
Absolutely. And as part of our design process, we've been working closely with SPD, as you can imagine. So we have a strategy that we can take.
Any further questions for the applicants at this stage? Thank Councillor Whittam.
On that, we have asked other people to have, for example, a women-only floor.
We're happy to look at something that is specific, gender specific, yes.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. Yes, you're absolutely right. We'll brought up the councillor combo criteria. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, that'd be helpful. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. If you could return to the public seating area. Thank you. Do we have any supporters who live within 100 metres of the site that wish to address the committee? And we don't have any ward councillors that will speak in their capacity as a ward councillor. Any further questions or comments that anybody wants to make today? No further questions? Any comments or observations, anyone? Councillor Harper.
It is an observation. I think as Southwark councillor, very careful power like this. I say that with the understanding that kind of material planning, not much I can kind of back on here, and I do also really welcome how many social housing. Patrick, I thought you made some very excellent points. Excellent. One thing I'm going to pick up on is you said that this is a market and this is a choice that residents. I kind of push back on that slightly. There is a housing crisis. I think there's lots of people who live in London, whether or not it's a place to live in what to me looks like a hellscape, and some. I think we would have been quite shocked to see it. Valid living arrangements for people. In my opinion, I don't think this is going to reduce shared houses for adults. I mean, the applicant wasn't able to give a clear idea of how much they charge for these. Having done some very brief research and prior to coming here today, and there's a similar scheme at Battersea where it's about £2,000 a month studio in one of these schemes, which is obviously a lot more than a bed house per month. Yeah, so I guess it would be a choice for people, but it's a choice that Southwark's endorsing, and I think the nature of this, I don't think this is housing direction along it. Someone mentioned as terms of the building construction, it's like similar to a hotel, and it is similar to a hotel, and I don't think that's kind of our residents. But yes, there is already planning permission. I think the scheme is better than permission, so I don't think I'll be able to vote anyway other than favour, but I would like that, I don't know, maybe that kind of point about Southwark needing its own LPG Sorry. What does I wrote down LPG and I don't know why. Not very good at acronyms. Apologies, everyone. Yeah, those are my comments. Sorry, that was quite ranty.
No, I think that's helpful.
Oh, sorry. One other thing. I think the thing about the bicycles, like this is really like we're trying to have a more like sustainable transport mechanism. I think bikes are something really promoting. 40% shortfall is quite high in terms of storage, and like actually having bikes on your wall, someone's okay with that. I think that should be something the applicant considered without just kind of refusing it without even kind of considering it as an option. I think that is disappointing.
No, some really good points there, and I think that talks to the points that came earlier about how we do need an SPD on this. Now, I recognise, given where we were at the beginning of the meeting, that there are lots of SPDs being done at the moment, and therefore I can understand why policy officers haven't managed to do that with the 3 that we had to agree already today to go to Cabinet. But I do think it is important that we are getting forward with that work, because it's something that's becoming increased. Yeah, we're getting to see quite a lot of these applications here, and I think we do find ourselves as a committee sometimes grappling a little bit in the dark and trying to make the best guess about some of these things, and we have that detailed look. Councillor Whitton.
Do welcome Councillor Harper joining the good fight, really, because there is the co-living and co-living. Women get one sort of, you know what you're getting. And because there's no set standard, then, sometimes you don't get the best quality. So.
Okay, I think officers have heard that very loud and clear from committee that we want to see that work being progressed. And just on the second point, Patrick, about cycling, I think you said that there was a mechanism to review the situation with cycling if it was becoming very clear that that there wasn't sufficient space for the people that were moving place.
Yes, that's correct. We always secure major applications as travel plan. And really it's down to the applicant to monitor and demonstrate uptake of long stay cycle parking. And it's also down to the applicant to devise some creative solutions as to how they could provide kind of in-kind provision if the on-site 450 spaces in this case actually are being readily and often. So yes, it's something we ordinarily do, and it'll be down to the applicant to think up some options. But one might be, for example, to provide applicants with credit for Santander cycling. They can go and use, hire bikes locally or something like that. Those are generally the kind of effect. So there is that mechanism in place, but
there is a Santander docking station about 100 metres from this site.
I'm certainly happy to share, the drafts of the study that we're doing on cycle parking. And this is the last committee meeting of this year's committee cycle. So over the last 7 months, the committee's approved at 10,000 cycle parking spaces. So that it's 10,000 cycle parking spaces about every year. So there's a lot of cycle parking being provided. And yeah, I mean, I think
albeit only 400 here.
Yeah,
they can't walk into somebody else's building and use those spare spaces.
But it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting feedback. I mean, we've had some interesting feedback from the community review panel, which goes to Councillor Harper's earlier point, which is about security, not only of your bike but of yourself. When you're in those places. So yeah, I mean, we're looking at what's the best way of storing bikes. A more recent issue has been problems with electric bikes. So if you are building flats, you've got issues with insurance because insurers want to know that you're not going to have your tenants bikes in your flat, potentially setting other flats on fire. So yeah, it's seems like it might be something simple, but it was.
Councillor Whittam.
Yeah, have we solved the Thornhill Brook 7.9 conundrum?
Councillor Hartley, you want to speak on this?
I'm just on this. I was going to suggest that rather than try and determine it now, we accept the idea that 14 hours will be the average, and that if officers and the applicant can work together to make that more closely resemble a door-to-dust schedule across the year. My feeling is that better, but it wouldn't actually be open for long.
Yeah, I think we can do that. That's a helpful suggestion, and I tend to agree. It's sort of staying open till 9, sort of December time. But yeah, I think that was okay. But we can carry that out through condition section wise. Okay, I think we're now at the point where we can move to a resolution. So I would like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraph 1 of the report on page 192 of the main agenda pack. Firstly, that planning permission be granted for application 24 AP 3687, subject to conditions, referral to the Mayor of London and the applicant entering into a satisfactory legal agreement. And a slight change to paragraph 2, which is that in the event that the legal agreement is not being entered into by the 14th of November 2025, the Director of Planning Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission for 24 AP 3687 if appropriate for the reasons set out in paragraph 708 of this report. And just so you're clear, the original recommendation was 14th of August, but it's been proposed in the addendum that we go to the 14th of November, which seems sensible. Is that seconded by anyone? Councillor Whittam. Okay, can I ask how you're going to vote on this? Councillor Whittam?
For.
Councillor Harper?
For.
Councillor Hartley? For. Councillor Soanes? Councillor Richard Livingstone, I'm voting for that. That motion is carried and the motion is granted. And that brings us to the end of tonight's committee. Apologies for the length, but we've had a lot of detailed conversations to have here, and I think that's been productive. Safe travel home, everyone.